Hi, Vera.
Hello.
Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you to the regular session of the Milwaukee Planning Commission. Agendas and additional copies of staff reports are available on the city website at www.milwaukeeoregon.gov. The easiest way to locate them is to navigate to the community calendar where tonight's meeting page is posted. If you've not reviewed the agenda, please do so because it contains important information about the process that we will follow. If you wish to provide public comment, please log into the Zoom meeting or call into the meeting. Instructions for logging in and calling in are located on the meeting page of the city's website also. In order to be included in the meeting record, public comments must be received during the applicable portion of the meeting. That is, general comments must be made during the open audience participation portion of the meeting, and comments on specific public hearings or work sessions must be made before the close of the public testimony portion of the agenda item. Next on the agenda is the approval of the amended meetings from the August 11th meeting and the approval of the September 22nd meetings. Does anyone have any corrections to make to the August 11th amended meeting minutes? I see no hands that go up.
I'd like to entertain a motion to accept the August 11th, 2020, page 3 amended.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All the commissioners in attendance answered in the affirmative. And now I'll ask if there's any comments about the September 22nd meeting minutes. Okay, I see none. Does anyone have a motion to approve?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the September 22, 2020 minutes as written.
Thank you.
Second.
And we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The minutes for the September 22nd meeting are approved as well. Are there any informational items from the staff at this point?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one informational item, if I may.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to let folks know to take a look at the November issue of the pilot when it comes out at the beginning of next week. There is one of the articles in there is about the comprehensive plan implementation project, and there's some information in there, or there should be in that article, about an upcoming public event, public participation event that's coming up. So I just wanted to alert folks to their pilot when it comes next week. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for that information. Any other items from the staff? We now have an opportunity for the audience to comment on any items not on tonight's agenda. If you wish to comment on an item that is on the agenda, there will be time for comments after the staff presentation. But does anyone wish to comment on an item that is not on tonight's agenda? If so, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom to indicate that you wish to make a comment. We will also check with any audience members who have called into the Zoom meeting by phone. And before you testify, please remember to state your name and address for the record. Do we have any hands go up?
I see one, Mr. Chairman. I think it's just a number, 796263. So I will bring that person over and promote them to panelists so that they can speak.
Okay.
Okay. They're here as a panelist. Again, the number is 796263. You are muted and your video is off as well.
Okay. Video's on. Can you see me okay?
There we go.
All right. My name is Rudy Puente. I am a board member at the Garthwick community, and my address is 592 Southeast Andover Place, 97202. I'm calling to comment on the apartment complex that is, it looks like it's being planned for being built in our close to our neighborhood here up on 17th by the Waverly Golf Course. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Let me, this is Chair Massey. So,
Yes.
yeah, let me just tell you that this part of the meeting is reserved for testimony on items that are not on the formal agenda. So you will have a chance to speak to this, to your concerns later in the meeting. If I can ask you to just hold off for a little while and we'll get to those. Okay?
I can hold off. Thank you very much.
Very good. Very good. We will get to it. Okay. So Vera, no other hands up for non-agenda items, general items? You're muted, Vera.
Sorry, Chair Massey, I see another hand has been raised for Lyndon Murray. And so I will bring him over. Okay. And should be rejoining here as a panelist. Yep, Mr. Murray, you're here as a panelist now. You are muted and your video is off. If I may, Mr. Murray, if you have comments to make, you are muted. There you are.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, I'll wait for my turn. Thanks very much.
Oh, so you had okay. All right. All right. So, Mr. Murray, you had comments on the proposed development. Do I have that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to move back over. Okay. I don't see any other hands up, Chair Massey.
Okay. And we will get to both of those citizens here in the coming meeting. I will mention that we received an email comment from the public. It was a series of emails exchanged between the city planning staff and a member of the public who had a discussion about ADU utility pricing. It's a fairly lengthy exchange of emails. I don't intend to read that exchange, but is a matter of public record and is available on the website. We will now move on to tonight's public.
Mr. Chair Massey, are we allowed to make comments on those statements that Ms. Roller put in?
Sure.
I just want to say, I don't know if it falls within our purview of utility rate billings on ADUs, but I do believe that she makes an excellent point that if we are trying to find affordable housing in the city and ADUs is part of that solution, that treating them as a full-fledged unit housing as a residential space with as high as our utility rates are today, and for them probably being raised in the future, I would like City Council, and I hope the Planning Commission agrees with me on this, that City Council kind of look at that and maybe review their ideas of how we bill ADUs and their utility rates.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamer. Let me ask the city staff, do they have a comment to make? I read the series of emails. Is that was an ongoing discussion? Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, I believe that is correct.
Okay.
Steve Adams, city engineer. Dalton Vodden, who's also online tonight, handles a lot of the STCs for ADUs, and I know we do not charge full price for them right now. Dalton, can you give us a quick review of what we charge for ADUs?
Are these for the SDC rates or for the utility billing rates?
I believe the comments that Ms. Roller was more concerned about was about the utility billing rates.
Oh, okay.
And I do realize that there are reduced SDC fees, but I think her comment was basically, why are we charging this, one bedroom, one bath ADU at the same rate that we're charging every other residential property. And so, like I said, I don't think it falls within our purview probably into this, but as again, I hope that the Planning Commission is with me on this, that we should ask City Council to take a look at this kind of idea in the name of affordable housing and affordable living in the city.
Chairman, ask if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
I think a question that I kind of had for staff was, it seems like there's maybe a key consideration in terms of the county and how the county maybe sets up a larger billing framework that then is applied to the city. Is that a correct assumption? It felt like there was some reference to that in the discussion with the kind of the member of the public.
Yeah, I read that as well. I'm just not that conversant with the agreements between the county and the city, so I don't really have a lot to add to it. I think that the city was open to some sort of dialogue about whether it was a change was needed, and so I don't really feel like this is squarely in the Planning Commission's lane. But I think, to Commissioner Hemer's point, it may have some beneficial impacts in providing that middle housing that we continually talk about in an affordable realm. So I would ask the city staff just to give us a quick, what's your next step, city staff, based upon this exchange of emails?
I can bring it up to finance. I think the rates are kind of set by finance. They're set by every biennial budget. So I can shoot an email out to Keith and Bonnie and see where we stand. I know there was an email exchange last summer with another resident about the rates that we charge, and I don't recall where we landed on that, but I know it has been discussed in the last 3-4 months. So I will bring it to their attention tomorrow.
Is that acceptable to the commissioners?
Yeah, and if we want to take a mock vote or just a nod of heads, that if Mr. Adams would like to tell the city that the Planning Commission had a very brief discussion and would like City Council to look at it, that would be wonderful as well, too.
Well, yeah, I think that we can certainly do a little vote here. I think the vote would be, well, let me just have a motion for the vote. I would think that I'm certainly not knowledgeable enough at this point to say yes, no, but I think it warrants further discussion. So I think that would be the way that we would want the vote to go.
I would like to make a motion that the Planning Commission ask City Council to look at utility billing rates for the treatment of ADUs.
I second that motion.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, all the commissioners were in agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will now move on to tonight's public hearing. We will follow the basic format listed on the back of the agenda, including the staff report presentation, testimony, and Planning Commission deliberation. This is the Waverly Woods Plan Development. The public hearing on PD-2020-001 is called order. The purpose of this hearing is to consider a proposal for a multi-family development consisting of 4 residential buildings, a community center with swimming pool, and a community room built over 3 phases, totaling 100 dwelling units. The proposed development is being submitted as a planned development application to provide more flexibility related to development standards such as building height in the Willamette Greenway zone. A planned development includes a zoning map amendment to add the PD designation to the subject property zoning designation. The purpose of this application is to request approval of a planned development and Willamette Greenway conditional use application on property located at 10415 Southeast Waverly Court. The applicant has the burden of proving that the application is consistent with the City of Milwaukee zoning ordinance, comprehensive plan, any applicable municipal code provision, and that the proposal conforms with all of the city's applicable criteria. During the conduct of the hearing, we will recognize those persons submitting testimony. And again, we ask that when you submit testimony, you please state your name and address for the record so that they may be entered into the official minutes. If you are here to testify, please remember to confine your remarks to the application and relevant criteria and to avoid repetition and information that is not relevant. During tonight's hearing, we're going to limit the testimony of each person who speaks to 3 minutes so that we have an opportunity for everyone to be heard. The Planning Commission will make a recommendation to council regarding whether the proposal conforms with all the city's applicable criteria, and I will now ask the staff to cite the zoning ordinance section or sections where the criteria can be found.
Okay, starting with Milwaukee Municipal Code Title 12, Streets, Sidewalks, and Public Places. Zoning Code 19.1007, Type 4 Review. Section 19.311, Plan Development Zone. Section 19.302, Medium and High Density Residential Zones, including the R2 zone. Title 17, Land Division. Section 19.401, Willamette Greenway Zone. Chapter 19.500, Supplementary Development Regulations. Chapter 19.600, Off-Street Parking and Loading. Chapter 19.700, Public Facility Improvements. Section 19.902, Amendments to Maps and Ordinances. And Section 19.905, Conditional Uses.
Thank you. Now we will address commissioner participation and any potential conflicts of interest. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest? Please indicate your whether you have any of those, or if you don't have any, by saying no. No.
No.
No.
Okay, and I think that we had more than 7 people say no in the background there. That's good. I think all of the commissioners answered no for potential conflicts of interest. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to abstain? No.
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 All the commissioners answered no to the abstention question. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to report on any ex parte contacts?
No.
No. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Sherman.
I visited the site.
Okay, that is something that we will address here shortly. Did you have any conversations with anyone at the site?
No.
Okay. So I would say that that does not constitute an ex parte contact. Okay. Does anyone have any rebuttal to the ex parte contacts declared by the commission? Do we see any hands come up in Zoom? Okay. Will any commissioner who has visited the site prior to the hearing please raise their hand? Okay. Did we have everyone raise their hand and everyone visit the site? Commissioner Ert? Okay. I think all of the commissioners have visited the site. Is that correct? Okay. Did any of the commissioners who visited the site speak to anyone at the site or note anything different from what is indicated in the staff report for this application? No.
No.
All of the commissioners answered no for speaking to anyone at the site. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the participation of any member of the Planning Commission? Do we have any hands come up in Zoom?
I don't see any, no.
Just for my own information, do you have anyone at City Hall?
No, it's just me.
Just, okay. It's all Zoomed. Okay. All right.
I'll Zoom.
All right. So let's proceed to the staff report presentation.
Okay. I'm going to see if I can make this share screen business work. Okay. No, hold on. Okay. Sorry, forgive me. I'm trying to navigate a lot of different screens here. Okay. There it is. Okay. All right. All right. Mr. Chairman, are you able to see a PowerPoint presentation?
I see it fine. Thank you.
Great. Oh, good. I'm glad. Okay. For the record, Vera Coley, Senior Planner. I'm here to present the staff report. I'm joined by Dalton Vodden, Associate Engineer, and we also have Steve Adams, the City Engineer, here as well to assist with the staff report if needed. Okay. Let's go to the next page. Should be able to. Can't make it advance. All right, I'll do it this way. Oh. So the way this is showing up on the Zoom is not quite as good as I was hoping, but okay. So on this map here, you'll see 3 properties outlined in an aqua blue color. The subject property is located at 10415 Southeast Waverly Court, and it is surrounded by residential development on 3 sides, both single family and multifamily development, as well as the Waverly Country Club directly to the west. A portion of the subject property contains Dunbar Woods, which is an existing multi-unit development. The remainder of the site is undeveloped. Access to the development is proposed from Waverly Court, which is off Lava Drive. Given its proximity to the Willamette River, a portion of the site is in the Willamette Greenway overlay zone. The site is located in the historic Milwaukee neighborhood. Oh, there we go. All right, and this is the zoning map. So you can see the zone, the property itself is zoned residential R2, which is a high density residential zone. Adjacent to the site and across Cambridge Lane is the R10 zone, which is the slightly darker tan brownish color. And as I noted earlier, a portion of the site is in the Willamette Greenway zone. That is the green hatched area that you see here. Okay, this is the proposed site plan. The application is to consider type 4 review, again, which does require the Planning Commission to consider whether the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the various code sections and to make a recommendation to City Council, who will make the final decision. In these type 4 reviews, the Commission assesses the application against the review criteria and development standards and evaluates the testimony and evidence received and the public hearing in order to determine what recommendation to be sent over to City Council. The proposed development is an addition to the existing Waverly Greens apartment communities. The subject property is a 10.8 acre site, again at 10415 Southeast Waverly Court. It's currently made up of 3 parcels, and again is currently developed with the Dunbar Woods development that you see here on the site plan. As part of the proposal, the applicant is proposing to adjust the boundaries of the 3 lots and to establish Dunbar Woods on its own lot, use 6.77 acres for the planned development that you see there identified as Waverly Woods, and establish a 3rd parcel for a future development that you see there labeled for future development. The proposal is for a development called Waverly Woods, which would be the phased construction of 4 multifamily apartment buildings with a total of 100 dwelling units. The project, as described in the application, would be phased so that building A1 would be built along the ridge in phase 1, and building A2 and the associated community building would occur in phase 2. The 2 garden buildings, B1 and B2, and the community center with the pool would be developed in phase 3. And this is the phasing plan. So again, you see phase 1 building A1, phase 2 there in the orange color, and then phase 3 at the top in the red color. And again, you see the access is proposed off Waverly Court. Oh, that slide is terrible. Okay, sorry, there's something happening with the Zoom. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to verbally tell you what this slide says. The application details include the various land use applications that are required as part of this application, includes the plan development, a zoning map amendment, the Willamette Greenway review, a property line adjustment, as well as a transportation facilities review to evaluate the transportation impacts of the project. The plan development, which is the master land use file, PD, The plan development process allows for adjustments in lot sizes, lot dimensions, and some development standards, including building height, as well as a potential increase in density, which is up to 20% above the maximum normally permitted. The zoning map amendment, the city's zoning map would be changed, and it would add the PD designation to the existing R2 designation for the site. Again, for the Willamette Greenway review, much of the site is located in the Willamette Greenway overlay zone. Development in the Willamette Greenway requires a conditional use approval. The property line adjustment is what will reconfigure the lots to create the 3 lots that I explained 2 slides ago. Again, the number of lots is not changing, their property lines are changing. And then again, the transportation facilities review evaluates the impacts on transportation, including vehicular, bicycle, and pedestrian. And those impacts must be evaluated to determine whether whether improvements to the transportation system are warranted. And I have a feeling that the way the Zoom is reading these slides, they are not going to be very readable. Oh, that's a shame. Okay. All right. The staff has identified, I apologize for folks having to just listen to me and not have slides to read. The key issues that staff has identified in this for the project include, have the project's impacts on traffic been thoroughly evaluated? Does the project design adequately address the approval criteria for review of a development in the Willamette Greenway? And does the project provide enough exceptional advantages to warrant the additional proposed density and building height as allowed in section 19.311, which is the planned development zone? And all of this information was included in the staff report. So I hope folks had a chance to take a look at that. I'm not sure why the computer formatting is so awful. Okay. The first of the pieces that we wanted to talk about was the transportation impact review. And so I'm going to ask Dalton Vodden, the associate engineer, to review the transportation impact review, followed by the stormwater impacts as well.
Maybe I can try sharing it from my screen.
That would be great. If yours is better than mine, Dalton, I would appreciate you. I'm going to stop sharing mine for a second. And Dalton, if you could share it from yours. Oh, that's much better. Can you be in charge of the presentation from now on? Thank you.
Yeah, so a transportation impact review was required as part of 19703. I had the number up on my screen. Unfortunately, I can't tab to the subsection, but the approval under for the transportation facilities improvement included finding a level of service acceptable to be level D, and that was found. And this development met that approval criteria. They studied 6 intersection locations, including the proposed site access at number 5, as well as a potential for future development site access at number 6. That is not part of this application, but they did find that acceptable site distance were at both. At acceptable stopping this site distance was at both. Intersection site distance was not able to be met at number 5 due to vertical curvature. We'll explore maybe requiring additional mitigation during design phase, but they did provide some citation that stopping site distance may be enough. What is required is frontage improvements along the proposed lot. After this boundary, shifting the lot boundary, their development fronts only on Waverly Court. And so there will be new sidewalks fronting the development as well as crosswalks. In terms of the stormwater and drainage for the site, the applicant submitted plans, some preliminary storm plans that include additional impervious area and their destination to be routed to a detention vault, which will control flows before leaving the site.
Thank you, Dalton. Okay. And thank you, technology. for not working, but now working. This is great. Moving on to the Willamette Greenway review. Approval of a project in the Willamette Greenway is a conditional use and is subject to the provisions of 19.905. The conditional use approval criteria found in that section include some key criteria, such as those that are listed here on the slide: compatibility with the river, minimal impact on surrounding uses, mitigation of any impacts, protection of views, conformance with comp plan policies, as well as considerations regarding landscaping, aesthetic enhancement, open space, and vegetation. So part of what this review also includes are answering questions like, are the characteristics of the lot suitable for the proposed use, considering size, shape, location, and topography? Will the operating and physical characteristics of the proposed uses be reasonably compatible with nearby uses? And will all identified impacts be mitigated to the extent practicable? So that's part of the conditional use review that goes with the Willamette Greenway review. The purpose of the Willamette Greenway overlay is to protect, conserve, enhance, and maintain the natural, scenic, historic, and recreational qualities of lands along the Willamette River and the major courses flowing into the Willamette River. The subject property is nearly entirely within the Willamette Greenway. So this section of the code does apply to the project. Okay, and you can see here on this map, identifying, again, from an aerial photograph, the subject property and the Waverly Woods proposed development area there in blue, and its and the distance, or how it's situated in relation to the Willamette River. Dalton, if you could advance the slide, thank you. So as the crow flies, the proposed development would be more than 1,000 feet from the river. There's currently no access to the river from the subject property, and the applicant's materials state that the proposal is consistent with the multifamily character of the surrounding area. Certainly there are existing multifamily developments in the vicinity of the subject property. Images were provided with the application materials showing that the proposed development would be set back from the river with a buffer of the existing Waverly Country Club golf course, and then multiple existing multifamily developments closer and more exposed to the river. And you can see these images that were prepared as part of the application. So you can see the Waverly Woods development, located within these slides, showing what it would look like from the river if you were on the river. Maintaining the natural tree canopy and forested nature of the site are stated as important aspects to the development, which includes the addition of recreational walking paths through the forested site. So the arborist report and the tree plan that was submitted as part of the application did identify that some trees are being removed from the site as part of the development, but more than 50% of the site is being retained in vegetation post-development. The application materials and statements from the applicant show that by maintaining the forest to the extent that is possible and purposefully orienting the new development, the views to and from the river would be minimally impacted. So that was a consideration as part of how the applicant was situating and orienting the buildings within the project. The proposal includes some new opportunities for views to the river through the creation of some recreational paths as part of the project itself. And overall, and as part of the forest maintenance that is being proposed, they would be removing invasive species as well as some diseased trees from the site as well. Next slide, please. Okay. And the major aspect of this project is the plan development review. And some of the key aspects of the plan development review for this project are particular places where the proposal deviates from the base zone standards of the site. So these things are an increase to the maximum building height, which in the R2 zone is permitted up to 45 feet, but is limited to 35 feet in the Willamette Greenway. So the proposed development would include a building height along the ridge of just under 44 feet as measured on sloped sites. And I'll get to that in a second. And then if the applicant can demonstrate exceptional design as part of the project, there is an opportunity to increase the density of the project up to 20% above the maximum normally permitted. The proposal exceeds the maximum density So 84 dwelling units is the maximum density in the R2 zone on the property. They're asking for a 20% increase of 16 units. So there would be a total of 100 units on the property. And finally, the proposal also includes an increase to the maximum overall building length. That's a development standard within the R2 zone by about 50 feet, so that it would be a little over 200 feet wide for one of the buildings end to end instead of the maximum of 150 feet. And I'll have some more detailed discussion about these. Okay, next slide, please. So for building height, in the code allows, talks about how to measure building height on sloped sites. And in this case, so the R2 zone has a maximum height of 3 stories, 45 feet. It also allows for an additional story of height if an additional 10% of the site beyond the minimum is retained in vegetation. So in the base zone, in the R2 zone, the proposed development maintains approximately 54% of the total site in vegetation, well above the minimum of 15% in the R2 zone. So an additional story beyond the 3-story, 45-foot maximum would be allowed in the R2 zone as in the base zone for a total height of 4 stories or 55 feet. However, the site is in the Willamette Greenway zone, which does not allow buildings to be taller than 35 feet. So through the plan development process, the development would have buildings along the ridge of 43 feet 8 inches rather than the maximum height of 35 feet. And that's because when you measure the code allows for the establishment of a different base height or a base for measuring building height on sloped properties. So these 4-story buildings are actually under 44 feet when measured on a slope as permitted in the zoning code. And the reason for this this additional building height, part of that is they are proposing tuck under parking to minimize the amount of surface pavement on the site. Next slide, please. Now to the question of the density bonus. So the maximum density in the R2 zone is 17.4 units per acre. Parcel 3 is not proposed for development at this time, so that's sort of off the table. And parcel 1 is the existing Dunbar Woods development. So the density calculation focuses on parcel 2, which is the subject parcel for this project. Parcel 2 also includes steep slopes over 25%. For an area of approximately 1.9 acres. And the code requires that the net area of parcel 2 not include those areas of steep slopes. So when you subtract that, the total area for parcel 2 is 4.85 acres. The maximum density allowed on parcel 2 would be 84 units based on that net developable area as calculated through the code. Again, as a planned development, a 20% density increase is permitted if the applicant can demonstrate exceptional design in the project. So that increase would allow 100 units on the site. Without the steep slopes and that calculation, the maximum density on the site would be 117 units. The applicant, again, is proposing 100 new units of housing in the 4 buildings on parcel 2. And makes the arguments within their application for exceptional design of being able to minimize the footprint on the property. So they're decreasing the overall lot coverage with that additional building height with the tuck under parking. So they're minimizing the surface parking and pavement on the property. They are keeping more than 53% of the site in vegetation. They're relocating and enlarging the existing community garden that's on the site, and they also talk about in the application providing much needed rental housing in the city. Next. Thank you. And then the final or the third deviation from the base zone standards is the building height the building length, calculation. So this is one of the buildings that is proposed, and you can see outlined in the circle. The applicant is seeking approval to extend the overall length of the two ridge buildings to about 203 feet, which is over the 150-foot length that's permitted. The application materials, as you can see here, show that the buildings will be broken up into two approximately 89-foot sections with a 23-foot wide entry access area. So they're breaking up the overall width or length of the building. So from the street, the building will not have the appearance of a 200-foot long building. It will really have the appearance of two kind of 90-foot buildings with this entry area there. Approval would allow for an overall reduction in development footprint on the project, and that's part of the argument as part of the entire proposal, which would provide more open space and natural area on the site. And as we identified in the staff report, based on the proposed design, the building length is reasonable as proposed and is consistent with the purpose of minimizing the bulk of the building. It's also worth noting that buildings in the original Waverly Greens development do exceed, they're over 250 feet in width. So the additional 50 feet is not out of context in the surrounding development areas. Next slide, please, Dalton. Thank you. Comments were received from residents of neighboring properties regarding the visual impacts of the proposed buildings to their homes. The applicant submitted site sections, and those were included here, there, and one of them is included here in the slide, showing the relationship of the proposed buildings with those properties. The top one is the site looking southeast, and it shows a distance of nearly 200 feet between the closest existing residence and building B1. And then the lower section shows a section looking northeast and shows a distance of nearly 75 feet between the closest residence on Cambridge Lane and building A2. So you can see the existing residence there in the dark blue or the royal blue color, and then the distance between those buildings and then the proposed buildings as part of this proposal. And in addition to those distances or that spacing between the existing and the proposed buildings, each site section does show vegetation. And so the applicant, of course, is here and will be making a presentation and will be able to speak more to addressing those comments that came in from folks about the relationship of the buildings, of the proposed buildings to the existing structures in the neighborhood. Okay, next slide, please. So the approval criteria for the project include for the plan development itself, include compliance with Section 19.311 and other applicable code requirements, compatibility with the surrounding area and the land use pattern and density in that surrounding area, a demonstrated need for the permitted uses, is there adequate infrastructure to serve the proposal, and does the proposal demonstrate that it addresses a public purpose or provides some public benefits or amenities beyond what the base zone would require. Okay, next slide. Comments received. Now this slide was prepared before we received several comments after the presentation was put together. Been receiving comments, I think, as of, even 15 minutes ago. I have to go back and check the planning box. So not everyone is listed on the slide. So apologies if folks are watching this and don't see their names on the comments received. The timing just didn't work out. But we did receive comments from the Oregon Department of Transportation, the Fair Housing Council of Oregon, and then several residents from the neighborhood. The public notice included a 400-foot radius around the property. So we did receive several comments, and all of those were made part of the packet when the packet was posted, if we had them. Otherwise, all comments were forwarded to the Planning Commission as they came in, as well as to the applicant. Okay, next slide. The staff recommendation, as identified in the staff report, as well as in the findings and the conditions, the staff recommendation is that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the project to the City Council. Again, the purpose of the plan development is to encourage greater flexibility in design, to promote variety in the physical development pattern of the city, and to provide a more desirable environment than is possible through the strict application of the zoning requirements. Except for the Willamette Greenway zone restriction on building height, the proposed development could be permitted via review of variances rather than the application of the plan development review but the applicant elected to go through the plan development process for the added flexibility for building height, as well as the additional 16 units of housing for the density bonus. The proposal meets the base requirements for off-street parking, as well as the design guidelines for multifamily development. And we believe that the proposed design is in keeping with the purpose and the goals of the plan development. Final slide, please, Dalton. So the commission has a few decision-making options this evening. Again, a type 4 review requires the planning commission to consider whether the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the code sections and to make a recommendation to city council for final review. So your options are to send a recommendation of approval based on the findings and conditions of approval that were submitted to you. You could recommend approval of the application with modified findings and modified conditions of approval. We'll just need to know what those are and read those into the record. You could continue the hearing to a date certain, or you could recommend denial of the application to the city council this evening. The 120-day deadline for the application is January 9th, 2021. So that is the 120-day deadline. I have just let the applicant know that given the hearing schedule and the number of hearings that happens, there may be a need for a extension of that 120-day deadline. But it concludes the staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Vera,
Yes.
can you walk us through the sectional side again, just discussion about the elevation of the building and the building heights?
Yes.
Can you just walk us through that?
Yep. So the code has, there's in the definition section of the code for how you measure building height. There are two ways to measure building height if you're on a flat piece of land or if you're on a slope. And if you're on a slope, then the code allows you establish a new base so if you're on a flat surface, of course, the bottom is the bottom, right? But if you're on a slope, then you move that base up 10 feet. So the code provides for an accommodation for slope sites. So it establishes a new base point for the bottom of the building from which you would measure the height. So in this case, because of the slope on this property, then there's a new base of 10 feet. So you go 10 feet up and that's the new bottom of your building. And from there is where you measure the building height. I hope that answers your question.
So, and yeah, it does. And so from that new base, the project is approximately 52 feet above. Is that correct?
From the street, yes. So from the street, it's the 44, and then yes, so it would be the 52 above there. Yes.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah, I'm reading that correctly. Thank you.
As long as we're on that same question, does the Willamette Greenway treat a slope the same way as the code outside of the Willamette Greenway?
So the Willamette Greenway code is very clear in its limitations on use in this section. It says that it actually measures it 35 feet in height. It cannot be taller than 35 feet in the Willamette Greenway, period.
So they don't get that extra 10 feet in that Willamette Greenway. You would measure that from the lowest point of the building?
I think when we applied this to that, then yes. So when we saw that as a prohibition, as a limitation on the use, so we measured it as it was 35 feet. Yes.
35 feet from where the parking lot is, right?
Correct. Right.
Picture?
Right. Yeah. And so even with it, they still exceeded their design, based on the additional stories and the additional height. Even with the additional, with the new base point, they still weren't going to be able to comply with that Willamette Greenway prohibition on exceeding 35 feet. hence the plan. Yeah.
Is there precedent within the district, within the neighborhood, buildings going over that 35?
In the neighborhood, yes, there are existing buildings now that are part of that Waverly community. I'll call it the greater community. There are 4-story buildings across Waverly Court from the subject property, as well as adjacent to. I was out there today, and there are buildings in Dunbar Woods that are 4 stories as well. Yeah.
And Dunbar Woods is considered in the Willamette Greenway, correct?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the staff from the commissioners?
I have a few questions.
Go ahead.
Could you go back to the zoning map? I'm also just curious about the application of the Willamette Greenway zone, cutting diagonally across part of the parcels, but not the entire parcels, and also applying pretty far away from the river. Do you have any insights to kind of share on any rationale or logic or thinking on that?
I don't. And when our previous planning director, when Denny was here as well, we tried to figure out kind of what was the logic behind the Willamette Greenway boundary. And it's not just here, it's sort of along, the entire area when it was applied. We couldn't find enough information to sort of help us figure out why it was drawn in this particular way. But I'm happy to do some more research and see if I can figure it out. But we couldn't find a good answer to explain why it's narrow in some areas, wider in others, follows property or area property lines in some sections, not in others. We don't know why this was happening.
Thanks. You didn't uncover anything in that exploration about, it's going so far away from the river on this parcel, and then it cuts in for Waverly Heights and is not touching any of those parcels that, presumably would also maybe be in the Willamette Greenway zone, nothing on that.
Not that I could find, or that we could find, no. But it's one of those mysteries I'm always trying to figure out, to be honest.
Other questions for the staff from the commissioners?
I have a question for Dalton, if I may, please. Okay, so it seems like to me that DD is pretty close to FF and not close to BB. So could you explain what makes something a D and what makes something an F, or how close is this to an F, or how close is it to a C?
I'm going to pass this one off to Steve, if Steve doesn't mind.
For these, it relates directly to either volume to capacity ratio or to time spent sitting at the stop sign or the green light waiting to go through, depending on if it's a signalized or a stop controlled intersection. The fact that it was a CD and switched to a DD at 17th and Harrison, it only crept up a little bit. I can look into the traffic study and get you exact amounts that it changed, but it's not like it's a drastic change. It just crosses over a border. Say it went from a level of service of volume to capacity of 0.6 to volume capacity of 0.62, it may have flipped it into the next category up. So the fact that it just switched, it didn't go up by much. So in my opinion, it's still a significant way below what is F, which is what we would need for an improvement to be made. Or E, I mean, sorry, I should have said E. LOSE is where we trigger an improvement.
Oh, E is the baseline.
Yeah, D is okay. Anything from D down is okay. D or better. Once it flips into an E, then the city requires an improvement.
So there is no F.
No, there is an F. That's even worse.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right.
There is an F. Some jurisdictions, I can tell you, like ODOT, they'll allow it meeting a certain level of service for 23 hours a day, as long as it's not in that higher level service more than 1 hour a day. So different jurisdictions have look at it different ways. So we look at what's allowed on anything that connects to an ODOT highway. They have a different standard than the city does for time or for delay.
And not that I appreciate the fact that you guys went back to a 2014 study and then did an increase because of the COVID and being hard to track it. Is that by state recommendation, or is that a typical way to do this now that we've been through COVID for a couple of months, however long we've been through COVID? But I mean, is that kind of a new standard kind of thing, or that's acceptable, or is that something that you guys just came up with?
No, this is something that we talked to our traffic consultant, DKS, about. DKS is a national firm. And so a lot of traffic consultants when COVID hit are like, okay, how do we move development forward? What are we going to use? And this is something that they've been using for all projects throughout Portland. I can't imagine throughout the West Coast or wherever their offices are. So it was their determination that this was an adequate measure of increased traffic. In my past, when we've had oddities in traffic, we have done a similar thing, that we have taken a base year count, applied a certain percentage of increase to it to get a projected count of current. And it tells you what any of the future volumes, you're looking at a 2021 or a 2026, those are constantly, you take an average volume increase and you apply it. So that's kind of in the industry standard.
I have two transportation related questions. Steve or Dalton, I was curious if the applicant has proposed any sort of kind of transportation demand management programs or incentives.
I don't recall reading anything in their application. Vera or Dalton, did you recall reading anything? And the applicant will be on next. So that's a question I would recommend asking directly to them.
Okay, and maybe as a second question, I was just curious if from a health, life, safety perspective, as well as potentially a connectivity perspective, if there's any discussions between the city and the applicant around connecting Ridgeview Drive to Cambridge Lane.
Cambridge Lane is a private street. It's actually, no one quite knows who owns it. It's kind of in dispute. The county, but it's not public right away. It doesn't become public right away until 17th. So all of Waverly Drive, all of Cambridge is a private tract of land that was created back in early 1900s. And so we wouldn't have the right to connect to a private tract of land.
I have a question.
Questions for the staff?
Yes. Going back to the variance for the height, that's specifically to add a fourth floor, correct? That's the only reason why they're requesting that. Okay.
Correct. It's to exceed the height, that 35-foot limitation specific to the Willamette Greenway, but to add that fourth floor on two of the buildings. Yep.
Okay. And with that, the city staff recommends approval on that. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
And could you remind me as to why?
So we, as part of our review of the overall plan development itself, the additional height on the buildings, we believe, as our analysis of the application, the additional height means that you don't have as much building footprint on the site. So that it minimizes that amount of footprint and that amount of development on the property. So by going up, you don't have to go out to achieve the same, to get the same number of units. So it's a more compact form of development. And in the materials that they showed and their architectural designs and because not all of the buildings are 4 stories, it's 2 of them specifically. So, and they have cited those buildings in a place to take advantage of the topography, to be able to do the tuck under parking, again, by minimizing the amount of development on the property itself. So by doing it this way, they're able to maintain, again, more than 50% vegetation on the site. Without that additional floor, my guess, and I think the applicant can answer this question, the alternative to that would be to be building either more buildings or larger buildings that take up more space or footprint on the site. So it was our recommendation or our conclusion that based on the site and the advantages of being able to reduce the amount of footprint and the way they treated the design of the buildings and use the existing trees and the vegetation on the site, that it was a good compromise and being able to work that through with the design to be able to maintain as much vegetation as possible on the property.
So then what is the 200-foot building length rather than 150? Isn't that still making it wider, even though they're going taller?
So for those 2 buildings, but they're breaking, the overall length is the 200, but they have that large space in between. So it's because of that wide entry area, the overall length on one part of it is the 200, but they do have that access area, so they're able to minimize the appearance of the length. So you're right. I mean, there's still footprint, of course, on the building, but there would be even more if they weren't able to add that 4th floor on those 2 buildings. So in combination, in the way they are treating the design, it seems to make sense. It made sense to us as far as being able to approve those buildings. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, yes, sorry, I'm looking at the plans as I'm talking to you. My apologies. But yes, but that way, and that is one of the buildings that is facing the street, so it's able to minimize the street appearance. But so it's a combination of the two of a couple of things. Some of the buildings are the 4 stories, but not all of them are. So as part of their site planning, we thought that they did a good job of being able to get the number of units that they needed. And
Another question kind of about measurements. Could we go to the cross section kind of shown?
I have her frozen on my side too. There we go.
Sorry, I didn't know she was finished answering the question.
The internet is unstable at City Hall.
Oh.
Whatever that means. Sorry about that. So I'm sorry, was there a question for me?
Yeah, I had another one, but I believe Commissioner Sherman had one as well.
Maybe feel free to finish, Commissioner Kozrabati.
Thank you. Nice job on the name, by the way. I appreciate that. Pronounce it very well. My last question was about the stormwater retention pipe. If I understood correctly, the stormwater is going to be held within a tank. Is that correct? And then slowly dispersed out.
Yes, they're proposing to use a detention tank connected to a flow control manhole before discharging offsite into the storm system.
Okay, do we know what the impact is on the existing storm system with that influx of stormwater?
I'm not offhand, but Public Works crews who service the area, there isn't a concern in terms of capacity there.
Thank you.
Steve, do you have anything to add?
They'll be submitting a full stormwater report with the plan submittal. They submitted a brief memo to Vera today that she distributed to the commissioners. However, we always require a full in-depth study be submitted so that we can review it and verify that the stormwater is being adequately detained and treated before it's being released.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have just a quick question about setbacks. What are the minimum setbacks on the side?
The side yard, okay. The side yard setback in the R2 zone is 15 feet. Hold on, I'm scooting over to the code just to make sure I have this right. The R2, yeah, the side yard setback is it's 5 feet. It's 5 feet for development that's other than a row house. So, and I think their closest side yard setback is 39 feet to the nearest property there on Cambridge Lane.
So with a less dense development pattern, like needing a fifth building as opposed to going taller on 4 buildings, you could potentially end up much closer to property lines than it is proposed.
The base zone would allow them to go to a 5-foot setback, correct?
I have a technical question, I guess. If the applicant is denied the PD development, can they come back with, since the building meets the criteria for R2, right? Come back with their variance list and go that route as well, or does it kill the project overall for the city's sake?
I think the code does outline how it works if a project is denied and how much time they would be coming back. They would have to wait to be able to come back. I think we sort of saw that happen on the 32nd Ave building where the application was actually withdrawn at that point, and then they came back with one. But all that being said, they would, if they were not able to go forward with the plan development, then the applicant would, you could ask them, what their alternative would be for a design process absent the plan development piece. And if they had to work with the base zone standards, including the Willamette Greenway, the Willamette Greenway would still be in play, plan development or not, of course. They would still be subject to that review.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
Yeah, I have just one. Vera, I didn't see this addressed in the presentation very much. Could you just kind of briefly give us the highlights of how the newly adopted comprehensive plan goals are addressed by this proposal and where that's relevant in the approval criteria?
Yes. Can do that. Thank you. So the comprehensive plan does come into play in a few different places in an application like this. The plan development review itself, Section 311, requires consideration of the proposal's conformance to the comprehensive plan and any applicable policies within the comp plan. The Willamette Greenway review requires consideration of conformance with applicable comp plan policies. And then Section 902, which is amendments to maps and ordinances, similarly requires compatibility with the comprehensive plan. So we talked about within the findings the various sections and how the policies of the comprehensive plan are adhered to by this application, including the Willamette Greenway section of the comprehensive plan, of course, the housing section of the comprehensive plan, nature, sustainability. They're all sort of listed out in the findings, but there are several sections of the code that require conformance or compatibility with comprehensive plan policies. And so there's at least 3 sections of the code that apply to this project that require that meshing of the comprehensive plan. So we used the new comprehensive plan and applied it to this project. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's spelled out in the findings, and
Yes. Yeah.
so I appreciate that. And ultimately, staff was able to conclude that the proposal is consistent with the policies of the newly adopted comp plan. Is that correct?
We did, correct, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Okay, Vera, I know the answer to this. You've already touched on it, but we have received other correspondence in addition to those that were included in the meeting packet. What would you like to tell us about those?
Yes, we did receive several that that have been sent
To make
out.
light of them, it's just a lot. Yeah, yeah.
There are, yes. I think there are, and many of them. So I'll call out the Fair Housing Council of Oregon comment that talks about support of the project so overall support of the project as a housing advocacy group. So I'll just sort of call that one out separately. We also received late this afternoon correspondence from attorney Michael Robinson, who's an attendee here as a representative of Waverly Country Club. So there was a 9-page legal memo or legal letter that was submitted late this afternoon. Then we've received comments from various residents within the area, and I think what I would do is put together sort of an umbrella of commentary where, for the most part, there is opposition to the 4th floor that is being requested. And forgive me for folks that submitted the comments. They have all been submitted to the Planning Commission, of course. But there is general concern and opposition to the 4th floor and to generally minimizing the amount of development that is being proposed in the neighborhood. There are also comments that have come in within the last 30 minutes into the planning inbox as well. And if I may, I just want to double check to make sure I'm sort of summarizing them appropriately. And I'm seeing that someone is having some technical issues joining the meeting, but they are also in opposition to the proposal for additional height and stories for the project. There's a lot of concern has been expressed for maintaining the forest, the wooded area of the site, and maintaining additional wider buffers. That's something that should be requested or required by the Planning Commission as well. So overall, there has been from the neighborhood quite a bit of opposition to the application, particularly the height. We also had a question about if there have been any geologic or ground impact studies done, and that if there is no buffer zone, there's increased land pressure on homes that could be jeopardized by that idea of instability, ground instability being worsened by construction. There was also a lengthy comment that was sent regarding the timing of the construction and its impact on area residents as well, specifically having to do with the COVID situation and the fact that folks are basically stuck at home and what those negative impacts might be on folks during the construction process. And all of these comments will be compiled and will be posted on the application webpage as another set of public comments received. But they've been coming in all day, and so we haven't been able to post them all, but we'll make them available to the public tomorrow.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been trying to keep up with all of those comments as well. There's quite a few that came in today. At this point, I would like to ask the applicant to come forward with their presentation.
Okay, and if you will allow me, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move a bunch of people over into the panelist section. So I'm going to move some folks over here. Let's see, Duncan, who else do we have here? Nels, Scott. If folks on the applicant team could help me out and raise your hand so I know who to move over, that would be great, just to make sure I grab everybody. I know most of your names. I just want to make sure I have it. I have everyone. Let's see. And Phil, yep, okay. All right. I think I have everyone from the applicant, from the team. Is there anyone else that is still in the attendees list that I've missed? I don't see any hands up, but I'm happy to promote you as needed. All right, Mr. Chairman, I think we have everyone.
I think I'll begin. Good evening. My name is Duncan Wise, Chair, members of the commission. I'm delighted to be here and really excited to share our plans for this. I think what you will find to be a really wonderful development. I want to begin by thanking the staff for an exceptional job through the pre-app process and throughout. I mean, they've asked a lot of tough questions. We've tried to be very responsive. And again, I can't say enough for the recommendations and the thoroughness of the report you've just received. What I'd like to do tonight is introduce myself. I'm Duncan Wise, and my sister and my brother, we together own the Waverly Greens Apartments. My sister Wendy will start with a short presentation on the history of the Waverly Greens. And then my brother Scott will explain our thinking of why we think this is a really terrific opportunity for the community, and why we think it's the best possible plan for achieving all of our goals. And then we do have our team, the architectural team, available to answer any questions you have about the project. And again, we can go into it as much as you like forward here. So with that, let me introduce my sister Wendy, and she'll give you a little bit of history of the Waverly Greens. Wendy. Are you there, Wendy?
I think you might be muted.
Go.
There you go.
Okay. It's weird when you unmute it, it then says mute. It's so strange. Anyway, okay, so you didn't hear anything, right?
No, start from the beginning.
I just wanted to start out by saying that I joined Duncan in praising the work that you've done, Vera, you and your staff and the other people at Milwaukee. It's just been exceptional to work with you. And I think the plan is better because of some of the questions you've asked and the things you've pushed on. My plan is just to go through, we think it's important that you see this as part of this new development, as part of a whole entity that our community is. And so I wanted to go through kind of our background and who we are and what we've done. And then Scott will talk about what we hope to do. As Duncan said, Waverly Greens is owned entirely by my brothers and me. The three of us don't own any other apartment or commercial buildings. We're not professional developers. We all have day jobs, but Waverly Greens has been and is a family project. Our dad and his business partner, who isn't involved anymore, bought Waverly and Stewart Halls. Those are the big ones, the 4-story ones, yes, right there. They bought Waverly, Stewart, and Dundee Hall, already constructed in 1971. They had been very recently constructed. At the time he bought it, my dad, who was big on philosophizing, sort of, said that he had a vision for what these apartments could be. He wanted to create a place where people could rent apartments and offload all the hassle and maintenance onto somebody else and just live in an interesting, stable community where there wouldn't be any big surprises and life would just go on and they would stay and stay, so that we could have a community, a real community at Waverly Greens. Duncan and Scott and I share that vision, and that's really what we're looking for. We've owned the property for almost 50 years, and we view it as a long-term kind of deal. Duncan and Scott and I have been operating it ourselves without our dad since 2005, aided by our manager, Deidre, who has been with Waverly Greens for 37 years, and she's our manager. And then Brian, who has been our maintenance manager, who is our maintenance manager and has been with us for 22 years. So we look down a long path when we do this, and this is just the latest stage in other developments that we have. When we bought, or when our dad bought Waverly and Stewart and Dundee, they were basically just buildings surrounded by raw land. There was nothing else there. So our dad's first step was to look into landscaping the property. He hired Barbara Feely, who you may know was a prominent landscape architect and designed the Salishan grounds. And with her help, we did just a massive landscaping project. The enormous lawn in front of Waverly and Stewart Hall and next to Dundee was created by us after we bought the property. And in fact, just to show you the true family development, Scott and Duncan went out and spent a whole summer sort of vacation installing the sprinkling system themselves. So over the years, we've developed additional parts of the land that my dad and his partner acquired. First, in 1976, we built the 92-unit Banbury building, which is down off Lava Drive and down sort of in the front part of the, I guess you'd say the east part of the development. Banbury is on a lower piece of property. There's pictures of it here, and it was relatively inexpensive to construct because the land is flat, and it didn't offer any particular, knockout views, just nice territorial views of trees and such. And so it was designed to be affordable, as I say, 92 units, and but my dad wanted it to have the great amenities that the other parts of the property had. Leases in Banbury on a month-to-month basis. That's the only area that we do that regularly. And market rents now are in the range of $1,150 per month to $1,300 per month. Next, in the late 1970s, we developed the Highlands, which is at the north end of the property, sort of up on a little hill. The buildings there have a lot of interesting design features and details, but they're moderately sized, and they currently rent at about $1,500 to $1,900 per month. Then in 1994, we developed Dunbar Woods, which is 36 units, and that's a picture of the St. Andrews building at Dunbar Woods. There are several buildings, or three or four buildings, and it was intended to be a high-end building. It has river views, and we put in condominium quality construction in terms of insulation and just features so that it would be suitable for someone moving from a home to a mature person moving from a home to a new house. And it's on the southern part of the ridge that we're talking about developing. The monthly rents at Dunbar Woods range from $1,700 per month to $3,200 per month. And finally, in 1997, we built Stonehaven, which is in spring bloom there on the picture, on a triangle, just a triangle of land that's at the intersection of Lava Drive and 17th, so it's close to the road. It was designed for mid-range residents or mid-range incomes, and it rents now it's in the $1,700 to $2,000 range. So this gradual over the years, and the last one was over 20 years ago, we've built out a number of different areas with different configurations and different price points. And our hope has been to produce a community that has, at least from an economic standpoint, a diverse range of interests and backgrounds. So one of the things that we've done to build community is provide extensive amenities and services as part of the rent. So the prices I just gave you, the rent prices, all include, well, first they include garbage, water, sewer, Comcast high definition cable, internet service, and an assigned parking spot or garage. So that's all within the rent price. And then in an effort to build a diverse and cohesive community, we also included a variety of sort of activities that would be available to everybody. And so to that end, we have made up a community garden, which is very, very popular. We've installed a dog park, a sport court, fitness room, meeting room, and guest apartment, all which can be used by everyone. Also, every tenant has access to a swimming pool, whatever part of the property they live on. We also sponsor a variety of community events, including music on the greens, meet and greets, rummage sales, holiday fundraisers for local charities, and the garden is a gathering spot for people from all of the different areas. And finally, we offer free classes provided by at Waverly Green by the instructors at Clackamas Community College in subjects that range from yoga and aquatic exercise to art, drawing and writing, memoir writing, I think it is. We also find that as the space needs or the financial conditions of our residents change, they sometimes move from one set of apartments to another. And I hope and I believe that that's a sign that they have become embedded in the community and consider themselves part of Waverly Green's, part of the home. Finally, the last thing I just want to say, because we're trying to extend this in our application, and it's part of our family values and intentions, is our long-standing commitment to sustainable, forward-looking energy policies. Over the years, we've removed the single-pane windows and glass doors. The glass doors were really expensive from the older apartments and put in energy-efficient double-pane versions. We've significantly increased the insulation on the roofs of the older buildings, that is Waverly, Stewart Hall, and Dundee, to bring the insulation to a standard that's above code. We're actively encouraging our residents to adopt to electrical vehicles because we think that's going to be a real hot issue in the future with apartments and how you integrate electric vehicles into apartments that have no inherent interest in providing the outlets for them. So we're working on that. And then finally, and is our biggest achievement, in conjunction with the Energy Trust of Oregon, we recently installed the biggest solar installation on an apartment in Oregon. So I'm sure I've forgotten some things, but that's kind of our background. That's who we are. We thought it was important for you to realize that we're not, we do have these values. I think Vera and I hope the staff have picked that up in dealing with us. We've tried very hard to make the new project conform to the values of our other work. And so that's the past. And now Scott's going to talk about how our new plans fit within that framework. Thanks. Here's Scott.
Thank you, Wendy. And it's a privilege to have this opportunity to address the commissioners. I can't see myself.
It's okay.
Well, I'd like to see myself so I know what I look like.
You're peering at the screen.
Yeah, well, let's see.
Just go, Scott.
Okay. Well, as Wendy's explained, the most recent apartment developments on our property was built in the last century. After our father passed away in 2005, it was left to us to develop the remainder of the developable land, which is considerable, as you can see, with this 6.7 acre parcel. The parcel we're now looking to develop has been in its natural state since our father first acquired his interest in it nearly 50 years ago. We've been exploring different ideas as to how to develop the property since as early as 2008, which was somewhat in the recession and a difficult time to do it, but we were looking at what we could do when things improved. And we got an additional plan at that time when the Dunbar Woods three buildings, the Dunbar Woods buildings were built. A design and plan for the entire site was developed, and that plan, when the Dunbar and that plan was approved by the city of Milwaukee, when that plan was adopted, those three buildings were built, but the rest of the project wasn't built. I think partly because it took quite a while for the Dunbar Woods buildings to lease up and become economical. If you can see from an aerial photograph of the Dunbar Woods, which I think is in some of those slides, the plan development, if that original Dunbar Woods plan had been completed, would have covered most of the property with buildings and pavement, with only small amounts of land available for vegetation, trees, and landscaping. A number of those buildings, as the original buildings were built, some of those were 4-story buildings as well. And the style of that plan was typical of most large apartment developments. The common features of those types of developments are that the entire developed property is almost entirely covered with buildings and pavement for roads and parking spaces, with little land left for vegetation, trees, and landscaping. And we determined, in light of the way that the Waverly Greens apartments are built now with lots of open space, that we wanted to continue that with the new development on the remaining land. And we thought we could do better than the plan that was originally approved by the city. So we started our looking at the first plan that we got asked for was done in 2008, and it unfortunately did not meet our hopes because it had a lot of buildings covering a lot of the land, and a lot of paving and parking, which would have required that a great deal of the property would be paved over. And then again in 2012, we started more seriously to look at this, and we asked for proposals from a number of architects. And a number of those had the same deficiencies, that they just covered too much of the land with buildings and parking and pavement and roads. Out of the architects we were then looking at, one firm stood out for its focus on environmental and sustainability concerns and its creativity in finding ways to meet our objectives. That firm is the one that has now developed the plan that we're proposing, Yost Grubel Hall Architecture. We've been working with them very seriously for about a year now, and we've gone through countless numbers of changes to the plans to try to improve it and in such a way as to make this project fill our goals and still be economically viable. Unlike the original Dunbar Woods plans that would have had the entire site covered with roadways and buildings, that plan had 3 roadways running through most of the property, whereas the current plan that we're proposing has reduced the visible roads to 1. It's one of the ingenious solutions that Yost Grubel Hall designed, was to have the main access road to the apartments actually go under the apartments so that they're not visible outside of the apartment buildings themselves. And those access the apartments and the parking, that's where most of the access will happen. So that the only road that will actually be visible on the entire parcel is the one road that goes in front of the apartment buildings, which you really have to have because visitors need to come and see where the apartment is. And the result of doing it in this way, by putting the parking underneath the buildings, and having the access road underneath the buildings allowed us to retain almost 54% of the land in a natural or landscaped state, which greatly exceeds the minimum code requirement of 15%. And that has been our fundamental objective with this plan, was to try to maintain as much of the natural environment as we could. And it's been one of our other important considerations of this plan was to keep the buildings well back from the Waverly Country Club golf course. The first buildings which we plan to build is set back from the golf course more than 190 feet. The A2 building, which may be built in the future, which is also along the ridge, will be set back from the golf course by more than 100 feet. Because the land between the buildings and the golf course will be left in the natural state, and they're covered with a lot of large trees and very tall trees, they'll provide a substantial buffer between the golf course and the buildings, so that the visibility of the buildings from the golf course or from the river or across the river will be minimal, as can be seen from the slide that Vera showed you. It's difficult to imagine how this property could be developed so as to have less of an effect on the Waverly Country Club than the plan which has been proposed, which leaves the impression that if they're objecting to this plan, their objective may be simply that it not be developed at all. Of course, building a level of parking underneath the apartments is very expensive as compared to simply installing surface parking. But if you install surface parking, it requires a tremendous amount of land be paved over. If the needed parking were installed on surface, it would require that most of the land that we do not have buildings on would be paved to provide that parking. So the trade-off we were required to make, and that we've gone through over a year to develop and working with Vera to achieve the objectives that we have, is to make the buildings somewhat bigger and taller. And it's just not economically feasible to build these buildings on the ridge with underground parking without having them be 4-story buildings. And by having the 4-story buildings enables us to have only 4 buildings to achieve the density goal that we had, and to avoid covering most of the land with buildings and paving, and thereby retain as much of the natural environment as possible. Now, I guess I'm not able to see exactly what slide we're looking at. Let me see. Okay, well that shows the elevation of the building, that slide. And it shows that from the front of the building, I think the actual front of the building from the gutter line down is about 38 feet or so, I think is what our architects tell us. With the roof, it's a little bit higher. And so there is that's simply a trade-off that we have to make if we want to achieve the other objectives. That is, to be able to achieve the density and to avoid covering most of the land with buildings and pavement. And I think in our view, this is really the only way that we can achieve those objectives and have an economically viable project. And one thing I would like to also mention is that the phasing plan is, as you can see from that slide, the green building, A1, is really the first building that we intend to build. And the others will probably be considerably down the road, because the cost of these buildings is pretty high, and as it's just the 3 of us, there's a limit to what we can do. So I can't say just how soon any of those other buildings will be built. Our hope is to build them eventually, but it's probably not going to happen soon. And this slide shows the big buildings that are shorter. And then we also want to address somewhat of the neighbors' concerns. I unfortunately haven't been able to see all the ones that came in at the last minute, but there were some common themes. We met with the neighborhood association last summer and presented the plan and got their feedback. And there wasn't a great deal of concern, although there were some objections to it. It is notable that there aren't really many properties that are affected by this development. Certainly the first building that we're focused on, building A1, will largely not be seen by anyone that neighbors our property, because it's essentially right in the middle of it, and it's got, you know, a vast amount of trees between it and even the golf course. And the neighbors to the north won't see it probably at all. The concerns, we also met with the neighbors, recently met with the neighbors to the north. There's 2 houses that are modestly close to the property and one that's a bit further back. And we talked to them about their concerns, and we like to have good relations with the neighbors, and I thought we had a very cordial meeting, and we had the opportunity to hear what their concerns are. So I'd like to discuss a few of them. One was about there's a fence between our property and their property, and since our property is pretty thick, we don't get back in there very often, and they've pointed out that there's been a little bit of damage from falling limbs and whatnot that we're happy to repair, and we're happy to maintain that fence to meet their concern. A number of the concerns that have been expressed have to do with maintaining vegetation and forest and green space as much as possible. This is both for the wildlife and the birds as well as the vegetation. And that's really been our entire driving force in trying to come up with this plan that's designed to maintain 54% of the land in vegetation, trees, and landscaping, even though the code only requires that 15% of it be maintained. And I have heard also tonight, and from them, they had concern about the height of the building. I think the height essentially affects the stones and the next neighbors over, and one that's somewhat further distant. And we certainly are sympathetic to their concerns. The plan was our plan in preparing this design was to reduce the impact of the development on the neighbors to the north. And for that reason, even though there was a 15-foot setback that we were aware of, and we'd looked at some of the prior plans, including the Dunbar Woods plans, which had buildings much closer to the property, we elected to set it back 39 feet from the property line, which is, I think, 76 feet from the closest house. And I think from the second house, it's more than 137 feet away. I believe we understand the neighbors' concerns with the visibility of the building from their lots, and we discussed different means that we might help to mitigate that problem. We're committed to meeting with those neighbors along with our landscape architect to develop a plan to plant trees and other vegetation to help mitigate their concerns. Although the primary views and outlooks from those houses, the 2 houses that are near the project, face out to the west toward the river and the golf course, and that's primarily the way their houses are oriented. They don't really look toward our property significantly. Nonetheless, it's important to minimize the visibility of the northern edge of our building, which is offset, as you can see in the diagram, so that the one corner of building A2, which is 39 feet away from our property line, the other corner is actually about 61 feet away from the property line. And also below the buildings, between building A2 and the golf course and at the corner, there's a considerable amount of land that's maintained in open space that will benefit the Stone residence, which is the closest one to the property. And other than those 2 properties and the other blue one shown on that slide, there aren't other houses really that will be much affected by this development in terms of the visibility of it. And we'd hope that they would appreciate the fact that we're trying to maintain as much of the vegetation as we can. There was one complaint from somebody on Lava Drive about what would be the hubbub, and I guess there was a complaint that I heard Vera mention about the COVID. given that we're going to be building building A1 first, which is right smack in the middle of the property and not close to any of the neighboring properties, it's highly unlikely there'll be much effect on any of the neighbors from this construction project. The house on Lava Drive is not in the path of this development. Now, the neighbors also expressed concerns, particularly the two houses that are closest, to drainage problems. And we've worked with the engineers to build new storm sewers on our property. And our belief is that the drainage the drainage in their direction will be substantially diminished by this project, particularly when building A2 and if building B2 are built, because all the runoff from the roofs of those buildings will go into the stormwater system and drain away from their properties. There was some concern about light from the property, and we've had studies done and are committed to producing downlights so that there's no direct glare onto any other property. And since most of the properties are far away from these developments anyway, we're hoping that the light impact will be fairly minimal. We also have the neighbor of the Waverly Country Club, which we haven't heard from until just this last couple of hours. And I personally haven't had the opportunity to even read their letter yet. But we like to be respectful to all of our neighbors. But I would just say that my belief is, and I think you can see from the photograph that was shown, that the visibility of this development to the Waverly Country Club will be very, very minimal. And I'm not sure that they have any other real complaint to it. And so with that, I'd like to return it to Duncan, who maybe has a few concluding remarks.
Duncan, you're muted.
I'm sorry. No, I don't have anything further to say except a great thank you, Wendy and Scott. And we're very much open to questions. And as I mentioned, Nels Hall and the team is available to dig into some of the details further if they come up in the questions. So let us stop here. Thank you.
Well, thank you to the Wise family for your presentation. I'll ask the commissioners if they have any questions of the applicants.
I have a series of questions.
Go ahead, Commissioner Hemer.
Could you please tell me what you talked about wanting to build green buildings? Could you please tell me what standard you're going to be building these buildings to? Are you going to go beyond just what the Gold Star standard is for PGE, or are you going to go to a larger level? And what kind of things are you going to do to make it more environmentally friendly?
We're having a study done of that right now, of what we're hoping to meet many of the LEED standards. And I don't think we've settled on exactly what level of LEED standard we're going to achieve, because we haven't completed that study. But we're looking at, of course, the heating and air conditioning system, potential for photovoltaic cells on the roof. And we're going to have, of course, very significant insulation in the buildings. And I'm sure there's things I'm forgetting. Maybe somebody else could chime in.
I would just say we're looking for electric vehicle stations in the garages. And to answer, we're always very interested in innovative transportation options, including, of course, we'll have a big bicycle room. And, you know, we're very committed to trying to find different models for transportation as well as energy efficiency.
We have looked at the potential for an on-site sewage treatment, but it's our understanding that Milwaukee doesn't really want us to do that, that they'd rather we went into their sewage system. So we've pretty much abandoned that effort.
Do you have any other questions, Commissioner Hemer?
Commissioner Hemer, you're on mute. Or your microphone is...
Commissioner Hamer, were you done? Okay, I'll ask the other commissioners if they had any questions of the applicant.
I have a question, Chair Macy.
Go ahead.
Wendy, you had indicated the rent of a number of the different buildings on site that you own. Have you studied what rent would be for this project, phase 1?
Unmuting. We have talked generally about rents. Of course, that's a part of the equation in deciding whether you can afford to build a building or not. Is one of the components is the revenue stream. I think without being very specific about it, I think these are going to be high-end apartments, and they will be priced more in the Dunbar Woods range, or perhaps even higher for the ones that are on the top buildings, because the building is just so expensive to build that there's no other way to get revenue from it. We're aware that it would be nice to have. I mean, we're certainly interested in trying to make a home for everybody at our apartments, but I just don't think we can go any more than that given the nature of the property.
Okay. I do recall reading something about affordable housing, but it maybe is in looser terms, not necessarily the way we think of affordable in terms of working families.
Yeah, no, I think that I wouldn't call this, I mean, I wouldn't advertise it as affordable housing. We do have affordable housing as part of our property, and we're just trying to make it all work together. Given what I told you about the characteristics of the different pieces of property, this is the most prime piece of property we have.
Okay, and I have a question maybe for you or maybe for your architect. But if we could go back to the slide, the sectional view of the building.
Mm-hmm. I don't have any control. Oh, okay.
Oh, that's good. This one's perfect. Given that you are over the maximum limit, height limit, had you considered partially burying level 1 and or moving the mechanical units subgrade so as to not overbuild level 4 in that roof in order to get below that requirement?
Well, I'll let Nels answer that, but just one thing that occurs to me, and I'm not sure if that's the real reason, but the hill or the ridge is basalt, and it's very, very, very hard to. We discovered when we tried to put in Dunbar Woods that it was just phenomenally expensive to excavate it, and I think that's the reason. But if I'm wrong, Nels, maybe you can correct me. Nels? He may be muted. I can't see him. There he is. Nels, are you muted?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I can't get my camera. Well, there I am. The studies that we did very much looked at what you just talked about. In fact, we looked at really going half a level down on level 1, so that we had basically a 4 to 5 foot transition from the roadway into a mid-level between 1 and 2. Our problem is that we have uneven basalt. I would equate this to the kind of formation that we've run into of doing projects up at OHSU. You can go 20 feet in one direction. You don't have, kind of a formed a rock base. There can be big basalt and not broken up into boulders, but solid, close to the surface in one area and 20 feet down, 15 or 20 feet away. So there is going to be some additional testing, but that was a big issue at Dunbar that really drove the costs up. They had to, in fact, use dynamite to build those buildings and clear the basalt out. So we are trying basically to have a level entry. These want to be accessible units as well. That and the combination of elevator down to parking really put them into a category that is quite exceptional and will be, as Wendy said, this will be their prime, particularly the upper level units with their views. This will be the top end for all of their properties, which are over 300 units, and now we're going to be closer to 400. So the the idea of going deeper, we've basically got away from, and we are working very closely with Precision Construction and with KPFF, our both civil and structural engineers, to really vet these things and make decisions as the WISEs have asked us to, based on first costs versus life cycle and energy savings costs. That's the study that Scott talked about being engaged in. But it has included everything from foundations to can we really use heavy timber, those kinds of things. Can we put carbon capture elements into the concrete? So there are things that we're looking at with the WISEs, but everything has to have some return. One of the differences that we find as architects between owners is that a developer who is developing for a standard kind of pro forma would be looking at a 5-year life cost. So they would be looking at first cost versus all the returns coming in years. The WISEs are literally looking at 10 years plus and higher, which is, I think, the right thing to do. And that's what's making this project possible to a degree.
And then just the second part of my question was just relative to the mechanical units up on the roof. It looks like there is a fairly significant number and that the pitch of the roof is providing primarily the screening of those units. And the question was whether or not it had been studied to drop those units to the ground or subgrade in order to accommodate a low pitch roof.
So that is one of the options. We are looking at what they call vertical tack, which are through wall kinds of units, and two versions of those with or without ducted systems. And we're also looking at what's called a split system that would have heat exchangers on the roof. Those heat exchangers, weigh a couple 100 pounds. You have to have one for each unit. So there's going to be 32 of them on the roof, but they're basically about 2 feet by 3 feet, and they can go fairly close together. So that's not the reason for the roof pitch. We want to put the pitch that we have on the roof right now. It's as flat as we think is reasonable to do a roof that is actually metal. It'll be a standing seam metal that needs a certain pitch to shed water properly. And it's an ideal system that you have a clip system that you can add the whole solar array on top of it without penetrating the roof. So what you're looking at by a lot of standards of roofs is a fairly shallow roof that is recommended for a metal standing seam system, which is a very high grade. It's virtually a lifetime roof.
Well, you could also mention that those metal slope roofs also provide the opportunity for clear story and vaulted ceilings on the top units, so that you can get cross ventilation in all the units on the top floor.
So one of the things, thank you for bringing that up, Scott. One of the things that has been talked about is, how do we make differentiation in these units? There's 8 units per floor, times 4 is 32, and they're not different types above. What they have is different attributes. out of the 8 units, you have 6 are corner units. So they have cross ventilation. You have units that have 2 facades on different sides of the unit that you can open windows in one and the other facade and get real cross ventilation. The centers of each building, if we were looking at the other side of the building down below, can anyone see my cursor? Probably not, right? Anyway, there's 2 units in the middle that face the view. Can anyone see a cursor?
Yep.
Phil, could you use your cursor on that? Yeah.
Yes.
The 2 units here at the upper level and at the lower level only have single exposure in terms of cross ventilation. To really differentiate the top units as true, premium units, it's being done with both materials and with vaulted ceilings that allow for even the middle units, clear stories on the backside and cross ventilation. While we're looking at the roof, I also want to say that when you're looking at this from across the river or from a helicopter, it's also going to look like 2 smaller buildings when you're looking at what is the river side facade, because we have the slope roofs on both sides. It's broken up into 2 different slopes, and the middle portion is a flat or virtually flat roof. And that will be what we call a EPDM. It's really a waterproof roofing system that has very, very good performance, but that allows people to walk around, service the mechanical units. But by breaking it down the middle, when you look at these buildings, if you could see them, you can't see them from the golf course, I guarantee it. And the view that you saw would be, you would be on Macadam Street, backed up to Dunthorpe on the other side, and probably about 30 feet off the water of the river, to see that whatever you see of this, the roofs are not sticking up even, they're broken in the center. So the roofs are not an issue, we think, in terms of the scale of the building. What will really be perceived is the breakup and the gutter lines that are established along the street. And then with the, I'd call it cleavage, I guess, of the buildings, it will really reduce the scale. I would add that the long-term phase 3 buildings literally meet all of the criteria in terms of length, and they are still even broken up to achieve a smaller scale. And that we think that cross ventilation and opening of views is important also for the community facilities in the center here. And having an area between the buildings that can be a small meeting space in the future with an outside deck or something also provides a view from the community facilities through and out rather than containing it, and allows for cross ventilation to go through these buildings and between the buildings. Does that answer questions?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, the commissioners, for the developers?
Yes. Thank you for the presentation. My question is going back to the variance. So at the end of the day, I know the city staff, you had mentioned that the trade-off was there in order to get that 4th story. Yeah. But I'm having a difficult time trying to see what the trade-off is when these apartments are high-end apartments. So having a variance and a 4th floor, what's the trade-off to the people of the city for that variance if majority of people can't afford it?
Well, there's a number of things. One is that the more housing you have, some people will move into this housing that would be otherwise occupying some other housing that then becomes available. Secondly, the well, it's my understanding the city of Milwaukee wants to have more housing. The fourth floor, the primary benefit is that the city of Milwaukee, I believe, would like to maintain open space in the same way that we want to. And it just simply can't be achieved without doing it in this way.
I have an additional question to that. The climate impact hasn't been studied yet, correct? Did I hear that correctly? Like environmental impact, there hasn't been a study on that, or excuse me, a study on the buildings using more eco-friendly materials and things like that, correct?
We have a study ongoing now. It hasn't been completed.
Okay, and then there's yet to be a full study on the stormwater system and the effect that it'll have on the city's existing stormwater system. It just seems like there's a lot that still needs to be figured out. So, I mean, am I missing something, or does it seem like it seems a little bit rushed on this project? Looking at the lack of the NDA, was it last summer or this past summer that you had discussed with the NDA?
That we discussed with what?
The neighborhood association. You guys had met with them, correct? You had mentioned that.
Yes, we met with them this past summer. That's right.
This past summer. Okay.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of input in that? Because a lot of the comments that I'm reading was that there in fact wasn't a lot of people even at the meeting.
Well, it was a Zoom meeting, and we don't know exactly who was there. At least I couldn't tell who was there. Certainly, the chairman of the NDA, he wrote to one of the people who have filed complaints and said, you know, I sent notices to everybody I knew of who were on my list, and so I think, you know, they just weren't thinking about it at that point.
On the two issues you raised, I mean, again, we are very committed to energy efficiency, as I think, again, we have the largest solar installation of any apartment in the state, we believe, and I think that's certainly what the Energy Trust has told us. And so that's, you know, we're still in that phase as we finish the work, but we are going to, these will be very energy efficient buildings. And again, I think you heard that, you know, we've on the storm drainage, you know, we've met all the requirements to date and we'll continue to work, but we fully expect to be in compliance as this moves forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And if it seems like it's moving quickly to you, it doesn't seem that way to us, because as any of these types of projects, as you probably well know, there is an importance to keeping the thing moving, because you know, we have to put a lot of money into getting it to this point, and once we get approval, we need to be able to move quickly, because otherwise the thing may become uneconomic if it gets postponed beyond next year.
And I apologize. I didn't mean to say that it's moving quickly. What I meant was in terms of there's still a lot of unknowns associated with the project that I think need to be found out, or I would have, me individually, I'd like to have known that. And there seems to be a lot of public comment coming in at the last minute, and it seems like there's a lot more left out there to be heard and listened to prior to moving forward. That's just my take. You know, like I understand what you're saying, because you know I had a construction company myself, and I know with permits and things like that, it takes time. There's a lot of money involved with planning these things. But at the end of the day, you know, there's still a lot that needs to be figured out. It sounds like.
Well, we've certainly been trying to solve all the problems that we've been told about, and I think the storm sewer is going to get solved. We've got engineers working on it, and I don't think there's any doubt but that it's going to work.
Thank you.
Chair Massey, if I may, I have a handful of questions.
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Just curious, and I'm not sure, Duncan or Scott or Wendy, you were talking about some of the previous development plans, kind of for the parcels in the past. I don't know if you happen to have any schematics or kind of remember off the top of your mind around, those proposals and how many trees would have been eliminated under those proposals that you decided not to advance.
Well, Scott, do you want to take that? Or, I mean, again, as Scott said, the original plan would have basically built 3 roads, and it would have been a massive number of trees would have had to been cut to develop it. And most of the versions we've seen would have required a lot more pavement and be a lot, more. This is a very compact development plan with the aim of protecting trees. So that's really why we brought Nels in and the team. So I don't know, Scott,
if you look at the it's not in front of us right now, but there's the aerial view that shows Dunbar Woods and as built, and the rest of it in a tree. That's it. You can see. I mean, the whole. It just in your imagination extend Dunbar Woods all the way across the property, and that's what you'd see. That was our last alternative.
And again, we've looked at many others, but that's a good example. But I mean, the key to having underground parking, I can't stress enough, is really important to make this work. And that underground parking is very expensive, so that's just part of the deal, and sort of why we're positioning these as we are.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Just an additional question, as kind of Commissioner Khosrowshahi was mentioning, it sounds like there are a few things like under study currently. There's a solar study underway. I heard you mention kind of electric vehicle charging that you're looking at. I guess I'm also wondering, when will these things be figured out to be included or not included kind of in the plan moving forward? Especially because I'll save on the commentary and just maybe have the question answered.
Well, with respect to the charging stations, we've already decided that we're going to put in the electrical capacity to provide charging stations for anyone who wants it. I mean, the main issue on that is whether you have a big enough electrical capacity serving the building to accommodate, to install charging stations. We're obviously not going to install a charging station at every parking space when 95% of the people don't have electric cars, but we'll do that over time as people buy them.
We're committed to an electric car future. I'm a passionate person on that. We have a deal to sell electric cars to our residents. That's a given that will be. And again, this will be a very energy efficient. That's a decision we've already made. It's just the question is around the details. And the answer is when we get your approval, then we're going to then pour into the next phase of the more detailed design of these buildings. So that's where we are, and that is the next phase.
And so something like the additional solar is part of kind of the next phase.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Now we have to go. We're well underway, but we have to now make some decisions. But again, as Nels and Scott mentioned, we're very much in that, and in terms of looking at the specific decision.
Could I say something, Duncan? Is that all right?
Sure.
I just want to say that all of the studies required to make this submission to the city of Milwaukee are done. We're talking about optional studies to get squeeze every bit of sustainability out of this, that the WISEs are frankly going above and beyond what you would normally see, even at a permit level of drawings. So, and this is not a permit. So in a sense, what they're telling you is the aspirations still have to meet some criteria, but they're paying for the studies to get as far as they can down the road to, what really could be a a very high, it could be a gold lead. It could even be a platinum lead with housing. But it's definitely going to be a sustainable facility, and it's going to be built. So what they can't put in initially can be added in the future. So as Scott talked about with the charging stations, the important thing is that you buy the service capacity, and maybe you start out, you have 32 rental units, and maybe you start out with 4 charging stations, but there's enough power there without changing the service to the building to get up to 32 charging stations. So that's the kind of approach that's being taken, and it's above and beyond by far. I can tell you, virtually any of the housing that you have been building downtown in terms of sustainable and healthy construction. We're talking about recyclable, non-PVC, all of those things are being considered as well. So it is really I think, a very enlightened view to adding to the housing stock of the city of Milwaukee. And the city of Milwaukee does need some upper end housing stock. I can say that the phase 3 buildings could offer chances for lesser rents comparatively whenever they're built. And as Wendy has said, this is a balance of 300 to 400 units in an inventory that is providing a range of affordable and expensive view units that make the whole thing work.
Sure. With respect to phase 3, I actually had a question about that. Noted in any of these phases, it's only 1 and 2 bedroom units. Was there any discussion about family size 3-bedroom units in any of the buildings?
There was, and that could be in phase 3. What we have basically in our initial phase in the Ridge buildings, we have a study that also could be like a guest bedroom. So they are large units. And the truth is that could happen to a higher degree in the garden buildings in the future within the approvals that we're seeking for the number of units.
With respect to phase 3, also kind of a follow-up question. I noted that those buildings are not proposed to go to 4 stories.
That's right.
Yet I would imagine you could ask for that in order to create additional bedrooms. Has there been any thought or discussion about that, especially thinking about providing more affordable family size units within the city?
We also have a limit on the number of units. So it's 100 units that we'll have. We felt that it was important when we go to the more level upper tier, what we're calling garden zone, it is possible to do 3-story houses and build out the density that we need with the number of cars underneath without going to the 4th floor. Frankly, for the neighbors on the upper side, and as we've said, there's not that many of them, they are dealing with something that would fit, the code. But the Ridge buildings are really the ones, and I'm talking about this upper zone here. You also have to think that, the area to the west has a smaller building facing it, and it's the end of the large building that is the only 4-story element. And as you go to the north, where it says the gardens going up there, that's a 1-story building that is actually, the roof of that building is going to be below Cambridge Avenue, or right at, what you're looking at is 1-foot levels going up the tier there. So, that's 10 to 12 feet above our building. So say you'd be looking at the roof. So this whole area is an open zone in terms of the properties above it.
But to your point, yeah, we can look into 3 bedrooms. We do have 3 bedrooms for families that, are popular. So that's something we certainly can think about in the B units.
Any other commissioners have questions of the applicants?
I do.
Go ahead, Commissioner Edge.
So I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about the plans for the forested area and the trees that you do plan to remove, and kind of, you know, why the trees that you are removing you plan to remove, and then a little bit about the trail amenity that you're proposing to enhance through the forested area, and the level of public access that would be available for that.
Who wants to take that?
Who wants to take that? Well, I think our long-term plan for the forested area is it's got a lot of I guess what I would call invasives in it now, blackberries and ivy, particularly ivy going up the trees, which are not good for the health of the trees, and I think has damaged the health of some of the trees, which we plan to cut that ivy off at the base around those trees fairly soon, so that it will drop off and clear the area out so it's got a more native species and natural environment in it, put some paths through it, and otherwise mostly to what's to the west, other than cleaning out the invasives, we're probably likely going to leave it pretty much in its natural state, with some paths through it so that people can walk through it. And those, I mean, I guess I'm not sure if your question is, are they available for the residents of the city in general? Well, it is private property. I don't really suspect that if people go up and walk around Waverly Greens right now, anybody objects to it. So, but certainly all the residents of Waverly Greens can walk on any of these paths or anywhere on the property.
And we do have an arborist who's done a complete inventory of the trees, and we're very conscious of trying to protect, especially the native trees, and you know, we work very close to it with the arborist to protect as much as we can.
And it's true that when you build a building, you have to, I mean, you can't build buildings on a piece of property that's covered with trees without cutting some of the trees down where the buildings are, and close, and ones that are close enough to the building that building would destroy their root structure. And so to that extent, trees will have to come down. And with respect to the other trees, we're looking primarily the ones that are either dead or in very poor health for removal.
Could I
thank you for, oh, go ahead,
I add
please.
something to your answer, Commissioner Edge? Phil, can you go back to the one that shows the aerial view and show the one with the neighbors will tell the story. Well, this to a degree does. What you're seeing is that where it says Waverly Woods, that there is a big swath of the sloped zone. Why don't you kind of run your cursor on that? And from that going down, that is where a lot of the significant trees are. Then we have kind of a flatter zone that is still, you know, the topography changes about 10 feet. The area that you see that's almost kind of clear in the center, that's where you see the dirt color and stuff. That's where our buildings are going. And then down under where it says Woods Site, you know, close to where 7 is. We are staying out of the heavy grove of trees that are really established. If you come up into what at one time was all cleared property, this is all second growth, that has a range of basically non-native trees and some pretty sick trees. And that's where a second building in the third phase and a last building are going. So that is the least, that's the area that is the least amount of trees that you're removing. And that was really the intent.
Thank you for that. And then kind of the last question for me is, even with the added height, it looks like your buildings are going to be, you know, dwarfed by surrounding trees and well below the tree line. And is that correct to infer from the materials?
Yes.
Right. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Okay. We are now going to ask for comments from the public. Vera, do we have a queue up of people who would like to testify?
Sorry, I needed to unmute myself. We have 20 folks that are in the attendees section of the webinar, but I don't, folks haven't raised their hands yet. We haven't given them that indication yet. So I sort of see the list of people on my screen, and we've already, so a hand has gone up, so we can kind of do it that way. I'm happy to sort of curate that list if you'd like.
Okay, I'm not going to try to break these up by in support of, opposed, or neutral. We're just going to take them as they come up. And again, I would remind those who like to speak to please give us your name and your address for the record. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less so that we can give everyone a chance to be heard.
Chair Massey?
Yes.
Could we take a 5-minute recess?
Yes. So, yeah, return in 5 minutes, 9:03. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anybody hear me? Anybody hear me? Yes, no?
Chair Massey, I have 2 folks that have their hands up.
Okay, we'll get started in just a moment.
I have 3. Okay. Okay.
Has the red light?
Yep, it is on.
Okay, let's invite the first commenter in.
Okay. Lyndon Murray, I'm bringing you over for comments. Chair Mass, did you want to should we be leaving the presentation up? How do you, I'm just noting that is still up for folks.
I don't think we need it.
Okay. So maybe I could ask the applicant. There we go. All right. Okay, Lyndon, you are muted.
To be able to hear me now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Fine. Thank you very much, Vera. Lyndon Murray. I'm a resident of Cambridge Lane, 9908, and also a member of the country club. I have a question for Vera. The plan development ordinance is very specific with respect to its benefits and its obligations. The benefits seem to me that the developers have taken full advantage of with respect to density, height, planning flexibility, but the obligation is very specific as to the requirement to set aside permanently 30% of the available space as green space. And in fact, calls for possibly setting separate deeds for the land. Now, given the way it's set up at the moment, it looks like there's plenty of space that they could set aside and meet the obligation of 30% of the land to be permanently set aside as green space. So I wonder why they have been allowed to have all the benefits, but so far none of the obligations. 2 other comments. One is I'm very concerned that there'll be a flow of people onto the driving range, and it'd be dangerous. I mean, the driving range is in operation every single day of the year, and it would expose children and dogs and random people walking onto the golf course to a dangerous environment. And the third thing is the developers are very interested in solar, and I wonder why, or I would suggest to them to look at Tesla solar tiles that replace the roof, actually become the roof, and they connect to solar batteries, power walls in the garage, and provide power to the entire building, as well as for charging cars. So thank you.
Mr. Murray, this is Chair Massey. What I would propose that we do is that we normally have an opportunity for the developer to respond to the comments. So I'm going to, I think we have your comments, and I would ask the developers to comment once we've given every other of the public a chance to comment, if that's acceptable to you. Is that okay, Mr. Murray?
Sure, of course.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Patricia Justice, I'm going to bring you over for your comments. And then Gloria Stone, you will be next. Okay. All right, Patricia, you are, yep.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. My name is Patricia Justice. I live at 10252 Southeast Cambridge Lane in Milwaukee and Waverly Heights. I have lived here for 41 years, and my home is close to the proposed development. You have received a letter from me stating my concerns, and since that time, the owners have met with us and heard our concerns, and I thank you. So tonight, I wish to focus on one of the key issues identified by the staff for the Planning Commission's deliberation. Under the approval criteria for review of a development in the Willamette Greenway, the question is asked, will the operating and physical characteristics of the proposed use be reasonably compatible with and have minimal impact on nearby uses? And my answer to this question is no. In fact, tonight, the owners acknowledge that the proposed apartments will have an impact on our homes in Waverly Heights. As presented, 2 of the 4 property lines of the subject property border a community of single homes, Waverly Heights, where I live, a community that has existed since the turn of the last century. And of course, the westerly property is adjacent to the driving range of the country club. Also as presented, a 4-story building, A2, and a 3-story building, B2, are just feet away from the boundary line with Waverly Heights and our homes. It goes without saying that indeed there will be a significant negative impact on us, and it needs to be addressed. I'm asking for a reduction in the height of buildings A1 and in particular A2 from 4 stories to 3 stories. This will lessen the visual impact from the river and from our homes. Also, please consider moving the buildings closer to Waverly Court, expanding the buffer between our homes and the apartments. And last, I repeat the request for screening in a height and density that will eliminate the visual impact of the apartment buildings to our homes in Waverly Heights. And this concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Justice. We have another comment from the public. You're muted, Vera.
Sorry, someday. Gloria Stone, I'm going to bring you over to make your comments.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name's Gloria Stone, and I live at 10230 Southeast Cambridge Lane in the historic Waverly area. My husband, Steve, and I have lived here for nearly 50 years. We purchased our property, and we did so with the full knowledge that the adjacent apartment property had R10 single-family buffer zone between us at that time. In the 1980s, the City Council saw fit to eliminate that buffer. I'll keep this brief because I sent a lot of material to you, including photographs, and I hope that you'll take the time to review it. Tonight, I'm just going to focus on 4 key issues for your consideration. First, the Willamette Greenway criteria is clear in emphasizing that the proposed use should be compatible with and have minimal impact on nearby lands. That criteria is clearly not met. Number 2, The development plan states that it is in keeping with existing development and will have no impact on the surrounding community. This also is not true. In actuality, the entire east and north portion of the development are inconsistent with R10 zoning and existing family residences to the north and with the existing open space to the west. Third, the elevations provided in the development plan did not include elevations from our properties. Our property lies downhill from the proposed apartments. As a result, a 4-story building proposed and it's about 68 feet from our southerly facing windows are of great concern in terms of what the proximity to our property is. 6 months of the year will have little to no solar access. Artificial light and noise pollution at that distance are also significant issues for us. And of no small issue is the ability of apartment residents to peer in our windows and the yard from 4 or 5 stories above us. And finally, of great concern to us also is the economic impact on our property. I'm sure you hear this a lot at the City Council, but realtors indicate that there is as much as a 20% negative impact on our land. So what are we specifically asking for? And we have met with the Weiss family and we appreciate their input. They were, like we said, we had a very good meeting with them on Saturday. We're asking for compliance with the Willamette Greenway requirements for a 3-story building. We're asking that consideration be given to moving A2 and A1 buildings further to the southeast, abutting closely Waverly Court. So in other words, they would have, the buffer would move away from us and into the Waverly Heights area, or the current developed area. So in closing, we're willing to work with you further, the Planning Commission, to achieve these goals, and we extend an open invitation to all of you to come and visit our properties and to observe the impact. We're here. I have my contact information on the materials that I provided you with. So with that, that concludes my testimony, and I thank you for the consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Do we have other citizens for comment, Vera?
Yes, we do. Hold on. I've got 5 more folks that have their hands up. Next is Maria Nash. Mr. Chairman, Maria Nash has her hand up representing the Shoreside East condominium development. They submitted written comments, and I believe she has a couple of additional questions that have not been responded to, haven't been answered as part of the hearing. So I think she would just like to go over those ones that don't have responses. If that's okay with you.
Okay, and we may ask the applicant to respond to those.
Correct. Right.
Everyone has had a chance to speak.
Yep. Just make sure that we know which questions Maria is referring to. Okay, Maria, I'm bringing you over as a panelist.
Unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, yes, I'm Maria Nash. I live at 1400 Southeast Lava Drive, number 2 in Shoreside East condominiums. We had some questions regarding the trees and specific ideas regarding maybe trying to maintain some of the dead trees for habitat for wildlife, and maybe doing some review of whether some of the fruit trees are historical from the Llewellyn property, something I can't remember right now. Anyway, so those specific questions, we would love to have those addressed at some point. I really haven't heard a lot about wildlife, a little bit tonight. Is has the actual Willamette Greenway review been done? And if not, will we see that in the future in regard to wildlife habitat? So those are things that I'm particularly interested in hearing about. Thank you. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed hearing all this information. It's great.
Thank you, Ms. Nash. Go ahead and bring our next.
Okay. Mike Nugent, I am bringing you over.
There we go. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are, Mike. We can hear you.
Thank you, Vera. First of all, I'd like to thank the Wise family for their thoughtful presentation and the staff for all their work. My name is Mike Nugent. I live at 12125 South Tryon Hill Road, Portland, Oregon. I am a Waverly member and past board member and president. I'm also a longtime real estate developer and broker. And I appreciate the challenges of development and the costs associated therewith. But I am somewhat concerned. As a longtime developer, I'm used to compromising with local neighbors and putting forth a plan that works for everybody. And I'm concerned that we're looking at this development with bonus densities and bonus heights and bonus lengths from 150 to 203 feet. And there are a lot of negative impacts on the neighborhood. I'm also concerned about the future development site and its potential impact on Waverly. And I'm concerned about the phasing plan because I understand the impact of economics and the difficulty sometimes of financing developments, but I also am sensitive to the neighbors and the toll that it takes having a multi-phase program that could have construction going on for, up to 7 years. So we have some very significant concerns regarding height, trees, buffer, stormwater, sound attenuation, and we've reached out recently and look forward to spending time with the family to try to resolve some of these concerns. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent.
Okay, Peggy, you are next. And then Mike Robinson, you will be after Peggy. Just wanted you to know who's on deck. So Peggy, I'm bringing you over for your comments now.
Unmute, start video. Oh. Excuse me, here we go. So I just wanted to make a comment about the rents. I felt like it was a little bit vague. I know that it might be a higher end rent situation, but just wondering what the capacity in Milwaukee for rents of apartments would be, and if this project would be able to bring those in. Are they going to be $3,000 rents? Are they going to be $4,000 rents? Those are house payments. I'm in real estate. So I'm sorry, I live at 10240 Southeast Cambridge Lane. I'm the second most impacted property on this project. And as far as the trees, I think I'd like to delve into that a little bit stronger because from my perspective, going down my driveway, all I see are impacted trees that are invasive and might get torn down, might get ivy thrown off of them for a while, and may eventually get thrown down. I think that's a concern. I think Gloria and Patty, brought up the other points that I was going to make. But I think the impact on the neighborhood, I'll just reiterate that for a fact, is that it does impact our neighborhood. And pushing back the 4-story buildings away from the street impacts us even more. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, Mike Robinson and Nancy Dalton, you are on deck after Mike.
Yep. What'd you say? Hi, good evening, Chair Massey, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Michael Robinson. My last name is spelled Robinson. My mailing address is 1211 Southwest 5th Avenue, Suite 1900, Portland 97204. I'm a land use attorney appearing on behalf of the Waverly Country Club. And I've given you a 9-page letter. I apologize it was given to you late today, but we didn't have an opportunity to prepare it until late today. And you'll have an opportunity to read it because we've asked that you continue the public hearing to another date certain. We're allowed to make that request under 197-763 6A since this is the first hearing. So let me do a couple of things. The applicants had a very long presentation. I hope that I can get my 3 minutes worth in here. So Commissioner, I think it was Himmer, asked about the comp plan. And Vera, if I get the dates wrong, correct me, but my understanding is this application was submitted on August 4th. The new comp plan became effective on August 18th. That new comp plan cannot be an approval standard for this application. And if you take a look at Milwaukee Municipal Code 19-1001-7B, it mirrors state law, which says only those criteria in effect on the date an application is submitted are approval criteria. So unfortunately, the applicant submitted their application 2 weeks before the effective date of the new comp plan. So to the extent the application relies on the new comp plan, unfortunately it can't because it's not an approval standard. Secondly, I want to go to something that a number of the folks have talked about tonight, and that's the applicant's desire to have additional bigger buildings, higher buildings, more units. And let me talk just a moment about density. You're able to get 20% density if you demonstrate what are called exceptional advantages. But two of the most important exceptional advantages that the applicants justify the additional density on are their environmental benefits and then the common public facilities. If you look at the staff report at pages, and then of course affordability, take a look at the staff report pages 10 and 11, and then the application narrative at page 3. Those describe the gardens, the community building, all of that in phase 3. You may never get phase 3. There's no guarantee that it will be constructed.
Wow.
Provided with phase 1, you can't count them, in my opinion, as an acceptable advantage. The other issue that's had a fair amount of discussion tonight is affordability, and it's obvious these are not affordable. They sound like very nice, expensive, high-end prime apartments in the description of the applicants, and that's perfectly fair. That's fine, but you can't at the same time call them affordable. And there's certainly no guarantee, nor is there a condition of approval requiring them to be affordable. And we don't even know what that term means. So let me spend maybe my last minute or so talking about a couple of general points. First of all, what matters, the plans are gorgeous, but that's not what counts here. What counts is whether the application has met the approval standard. And there are 5 sets of approval standards at least, and all of them are highly discretionary. If you look at the narrative, it barely addresses the standards, let alone explains what the subjective terms mean, and let alone explains what evidence satisfies them. Now, the staff report did a nice job of doing the applicant's work for them, but those terms are still largely undefined. Until you know what they mean, you can't determine what evidence you need, and therefore you can't determine if they're satisfied. So there's a fundamental problem with the application being able to satisfy the approval standards. We take nothing away from how attractive the pictures are, but that doesn't mean the approval standards are met. And the second point is the applicant, as I said earlier, bears the burden of proof in this entire proceeding. That's consistent with state law and with your code. And until these things have been corrected in the application, this record simply doesn't support an approval. I think one of the Weiss family members suggested that the Waverly Country Club didn't want to see the project developed at all. That's not my understanding. My understanding, as you've heard tonight, is that Waverly met with the Weiss family, or at least with Mr. Hall of the architectural firm, and they want to have a discussion about a couple of things they're looking for that would address their concerns. But until that happens, they don't support the application as much as they'd like to. There are a number of deficiencies with it, and until those deficiencies are cured, this application can't be recommended for approval by the Planning Commission of the City Council. So because we've asked that you keep the record open, you won't be able to deliberate on this tonight. You'll have to come back at a subsequent meeting and do that. And between now and the subsequent meeting, we'll be providing additional written testimony for the Planning Commission to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Okay, next we have Nancy Dalton, and then I have someone who is called Mulligan 2. You will be on deck.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, my name is Nancy Dalton. I live at 1505 Southeast Oxford Lane, in the neighborhood that's adjacent to the proposed buildings. And my concern has been already stated, but I just want to reiterate the Willamette Greenway and the pressure that this development puts on that, from a conservation of land, vegetation, and scenic views. The additional height and then length of the buildings, 25% higher than what's usually allowed, 35 feet up to 44 feet. And then on the ridge, from the ridge, it's actually 62 feet. It's 75% higher than what's usually allowed. It just seems daunting from a river view. And then having a 30% longer, 150 feet to 200 feet. That's concerning to me, to allow those larger dimensions to squeeze in the 53% forested tree area. So I feel like there are a lot of exceptions being made for the buildings that really compromise the greenway and the conservation of land, vegetation, and scenic views. And then I just have to reiterate what the impact is on neighbors and the neighborhood as far as light and noise. And just it just seems like they're asking a lot for just the entire area. And there are already several very tall buildings there, and that is a greenway. And this just augments the development of it. It just seems like it would be a 6-story high building from the ridge or the river view, instead of a 4-story high building, with the slope of the land. So I just hope you take the time. I appreciate the time that you've given this, all of us, to talk about this project, and I appreciate your consideration to oppose the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dalton.
Okay, Mulligan 2, bringing you over, and Alexandra Pitts, you are on deck. Okay, Mulligan 2, you're muted, so just
unmute.
Check. There you go.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. This is actually Mark Hudspeth. I have a property located at 9800 Southeast Cambridge. I really appreciate the presentation and the discussion tonight from everybody. It's a very interesting project. I'd like to make a few comments and perhaps a few questions. First of all, I'd like to say that the pictures that are shown, especially across the Willamette to this project, I would encourage you, each of you, to look at that picture and to see whether it really seems like it's proportional to what you're going to be seeing. Because I think it's somewhat not accurate in the way it's portraying that. So I'd really encourage you to look at that as to what is really going to be there and how that's going to appear on the river. Secondly, I'd really like to ask, are the citizens of Milwaukee, the neighbors to the project, the citizens of Clackamas County, and the citizens of Oregon really getting a benefit that's commensurate with what they're asking in this project? I would ask you each to ask that question of yourself, particularly for the people who live close to this project. I also have experienced what I would call mission creep as planning departments change their rules, sometimes for right reasons, sometimes just to get something done. But I think when we have zoning rules and plans and you have people buy properties and put down their flag for a lifetime, and then you come along and you change those property lines, you change the height of buildings, you darken their houses, you put water in their basements because of things you're doing. I do not think it's fair to do that. Even if you benefit 100 people in 100 units, I don't think that's right to do that to any neighbor simply to accomplish something for the greater good. I don't think that's the greater good in this case. I do applaud the Wises for their projects and some of the things they're doing with energy. I guess I would ask, are they getting a lot of energy tax credits, both the plug-ins as well as the solar projects? And if they are, that's great. I applaud them. Finally, it seems to me that we're trying to decide whether to make exceptions for a high-end project for fairly well-off individuals, renters, for fairly well-off developers. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody here is nice people, and I appreciate what they're trying to do. But I question how the decision is being made and how it's being weighed against money versus people's rights and our true quality of life, not just building taller buildings. I think that's it. I appreciate your time, and I do appreciate all the presentations.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Alexandra, bring you over, and then Steve, you are on deck.
All right, can you all see and hear me?
We can, thank you.
All right. I am also a resident of the Waverly neighborhood. I live at 10,005 Southeast Cambridge Lane. I will have very brief comments. Apparently, I live 404 feet away from this property because I was just sent an email last night by a kind neighbor to let me know that this conversation was even happening. So I appreciate being brought into the loop. I echo everything that my neighbors on Cambridge Lane and other people within Waverly Heights have been saying. I think one of the questions that keeps coming up to me is, why do we have greenways if we keep looking for excuses to build on them? and to break the rules that we create for our greenways, to then allow higher developments, bigger developments, and more imposing developments on these spaces that are supposed to be greenways. Another comment, we've talked a lot about the sort of visual creep and the visual imposition on this community, but we haven't talked a lot about the auditory creep and the auditory impact on the people, on their pets, on animals. And when I hear this, these comments about phasing, and it's sort of presented as a good thing, right? So a lot of these buildings won't be built for 7 years, 10 years in terms of the ones that immediately impact the neighbors. But what I'm hearing is that I'm looking at 7 to 10 years of listening to construction and that sort of auditory imposition on the community. And then the last comment I have, and it's it's both a comment and a question. So one of the reasons we moved to this community was because of the connection to nature. There's a lot of trees around here, and it fosters the support of a lot of wildlife. One of the types of animals that I see frequently in this neighborhood is bald eagles, for example. In fact, I saw one recently over in Linden's trees across the street. And so I know they're in the community, and I know that they're around here. And so I also want to delve into the trees and delve into the wildlife question and ask if there's been any sort of wildlife assessment on this land to make sure that we are not imposing on any protected species, such as nests of bald eagles or possibly other animals, and what kind of things that you found if that assessment has been done. So that concludes my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Pitts.
All right. And Steve, I'm bringing you over as a panelist, and Chair Massey, this is the last speaker that has identified themselves as wanting to make comments.
Okay, very good, because we're getting tight on time.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Hello, Steve. We can hear you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Steve Ream. I live at 10240 Southeast Cambridge Lane. And I am immediately adjacent to the new development. I live next to the Stones. And we did meet last Saturday with both Duncan and Scott, and it was a very nice meeting. They're very nice people. I guess a couple of things that this development how it will affect us are, we live in a strictly single family home neighborhood right now. It's called Waverly Heights. Most of you know it. It's a combination of diverse homes, some very expensive houses, some houses that are not that expensive, and a lot of them that are kind of in between. And it's really a really nice place to live. One of the things that my house has when I pull in my driveway is it has a feel-good aspect to it. Now, when this development goes up, there's gonna be 50 different apartments within 37 feet at the closest, and maybe 150 feet away at the farthest. That has a huge impact on how I feel as a homeowner. The other aspect of this is that it has a significant impact on the financial value of my property. So we talked about building a berm, potentially putting a lot of trees up to block the development from our houses, which I think is a reasonable place to start. Potentially having the setbacks be a little further back. But I guess what I would like to see if this development does go further is that whatever we talk about with regard to this greenway that's going to be built, that would be something that we have in writing that the commission agrees on, and it would be something that would be definitely built. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So it's now 9:41. So let me kind of get a feel from the commission about where they might want to head here, because we're rapidly running out of time. So any thoughts?
Chair Massey, yeah, I would like to ask the question of our city attorney.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to get the city's position on Mr. Robinson's assertion that we need to leave the record open after this initial evidentiary hearing, and if that means that we will be, in fact, deliberating on another evening for certain.
Yes, this is Justin Garrick, the city attorney. Mr. Robinson is correct. Oregon revised statutes provide the opportunity during a hearing for a participant to submit or to request a continuance in order to submit further evidence or testimony. So the hearing needs to be set over to a date certain, the timing of which it has to be at least 7 days, so we can extend it further than 7 days. At that hearing, a participant can request a continuance to respond to any new evidence or testimony submitted, and so we get into the back and forth process here before the record's closed. And that's a long-winded answer to your question, Commissioner Edge, but Mr. Robinson is correct. You will not be deliberating this evening.
So with that in mind, Chair Massey and fellow commissioners, I just wanted to, say that we will be, planning on collecting more evidence and more, closing the record at a later time. So do we want to allow the applicant team to respond to the questions that they've received from the public tonight, and then we can address a motion to continue the hearing to a date certain?
Yeah, I would like to do that just because the questions hopefully are fresh in their mind. But I would just, again, tell the applicant we are running low on time, so please be brief.
Well, this is Duncan. Let me chime in here. I'm not sure. I took notes on everyone's comments, and I'm not sure which were questions, and so I may miss some if I'm going to skip over just to try to hit the highlights. First, again, I want to thank all of you, commissioners and staff, and all the
Mr. Wise, does any of the other applicants have the specific questions?
Well, I've took them. I just want to make sure I've got them all because I was writing off. But let me just start with Lynn and Wendy.
Okay. I just want to make sure we address those questions. And
so on the open space question that Mr. Murray raised, I mean, obviously the whole plan does. By the design of it, it commits to the open space that we've been talking about. On the driving range issue, there is currently no access. There's totally, the area against the golf course at the bottom is basically blackberries all the way up and down. If that were ever an issue, we've committed earlier years ago that we would build some strong bramble bush fence to make sure we don't create access between the driving range and our property. But what we're talking about here is very, very distant and not really accessible to the driving range. He asked about solar and Tesla. I'd look into that. I'm not sure what the economics are, but that's a great question. Again, a number of these were comments sort of and questions, and I'm not sure I want to go through I can speak to nearly everyone's comments. But again, to the comments from the neighbors on Cambridge Lane, again, what we are committing to do is work with you to focus on bringing landscape architects to really minimize the impact on the neighborhood over there. And again, we did meet with the neighbors. We want to continue to work with the neighbors on those issues. Regarding trees and Maria Nash's question on trees, I'm happy to talk with you about that. In terms of looking at dead trees, again, we have an arborist. We will look at all the wildlife issues associated with the trees. We're very committed. Again, the exceptional value of this whole project is to protect trees, to protect wildlife, and to make this keep the spirit of the Greenway while allowing development, which I think is, of course, extraordinarily valuable for our community. In terms of the question on rents, we think this will be something we obviously we're building this with the idea that we will be able to rent them, and again, so the answer there. Let's see. Again, I'm not sure, Wendy or Scott, have I missed anything that, or any?
Well, in response to Maria Nash's comment, I'm with her on that. I'm very interested. I have a strong interest in trees and forest preservation myself, and she's right that it's good to leave trees that have fallen down on the ground and let as a habitat for animals. I'd love to get involved in looking at ways we can do that. And I'm also fascinated by the idea that we might have an antique Bing cherry tree on our property. I'd love to look for it. So
I would just say for the Greenway and all the, in terms of the visual outlook, again, we've covered that, I think, pretty well. But I think, again, we're trying to create a development that is exceptional, that protects open space, that protects, the values of the Greenway. But to answer one question about the value to this community, obviously, I do believe more housing is necessary in this region, and this will obviously advance that. It'll also, of course, bring in revenue for the city for vital public services. And of course, it connects with the downtown plan. We have a lot of new customers for the downtown shops, and I think it will help create a more vital Milwaukee. It does not tax existing infrastructure, so it's, in that sense, it's really consistent with all of our thinking in regional planning to use the land within the urban growth boundary to protect the open space outside the urban growth boundary. So again, I'm not sure I've answered every question. We would love to talk with all of the neighbors who are interested in further conversation. We want to be good neighbors.
Well, that's where I want to go from here. So let me just talk to Laura and Vera. I mean, I think we're, obviously we're at a continuation decision here, but are there actions in between now and the next meeting to consider this proposal that we think needs to be spelled out in any more detail? Because I like the idea of Mr. Wise's idea to do some more community outreach, but I mean, I'm not sure exactly how we specify that.
We also need to be mindful of the 120-day clock.
Yep.
Yeah. We do, because this, thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Edge, because, this is the first part of a two-part process, right? This is going on to the City Council for a final decision. And again, the 120 days is right after the first of the year. So we do need to kind of keep that in mind. And maybe there's an opportunity to have the applicant waive the 120-day clock so we can get through this as well. That's that will likely be an ask at some point, I have a feeling here. When we're talking about a continued hearing date, we, and to Mike Robinson's point, we have a lengthy legal brief that we've been given, so we need to go through that with city attorney really carefully and see kind of what needs to happen there from the staff perspective, and what we're going to need from the applicant to, if any revisions are necessary and that sort of thing too. So, and in looking at the calendar, the next hearing date is November 10th. I think that's too early to get this stuff done. The meeting after that is November 24th. And so we could try to shoot for that for a hearing, if that seems reasonable, to put materials together and make them available for review. in advance. Again, the staff report and so on would be, posted the week before for public review, and in advance of the meeting on the 24th. So I would offer that up as a suggestion.
Right. So that was what I was going to suggest, is that we leave the record open for additional evidence for 1 week. And then we leave the record open for written comments on that evidence for another week. And then we allow 1 week for applicant rebuttal. And then that's 1 week before the hearing on the continued hearing on the 24th. And that gives is that enough time for staff to respond to that input, Vera?
Okay. I think I wasn't thinking about it being that formal 777 kind of situation. I'll need to sit down with the city attorney and with Laura to go over Mike's, letter as well and figure out what that means. So you're suggesting that new material comes in 1 week. Everything gets posted, is available for review for a week. Written comments and so on come in. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if the week. I don't know if a week is the right answer, but we really got a lot of last minute information tonight.
And we need to move quickly. And so the week by week is kind of a minimum, expectation, or and the first week is minimum by law. But the rest, we could try to cut it closer. But I feel like everyone's going to want to have their week to comment or submit new evidence or rebut or whatever. So
Laura,
it feels to me like
that idea.
I just want to make sure that from the 17th to the 24th is enough time for staff to do what they need to do.
Vera, how confident do you feel about that time frame? It's pretty tight, I would imagine, from Vera's perspective, and from Justin and having to go through the legal analysis. So
the next time is December 8th then.
Yeah. I mean, because it really means though that we need to have everything done and posted and ready on the 17th. Yeah. Because we have to have everything posted for a week before the hearing. So yeah.
I don't know how feasible that is, quite frankly. I'd rather, because it is so important that we understand all of the issues and that we get it right, I'd rather take the time to do the good work that needs to be done on this and try to work through it than not be able to deliver.
So 12/8.
Yeah.
12/8 sounds about right to me. I'm looking to Vera. I want to be sure Vera's okay with that. Justin, you're okay with that?
I think that can work if we can figure out kind of nail down what the dates, whatever, because I want to make sure that the folks that are in attendance know what all this means, like what's happening for the next week and then what's happening for a week. And so that everyone is clear, of course, including the applicants, what's happening when. So get the calendar now. Yeah. So based on a 12/8 hearing date, Commissioner Edge, do you have a suggestion?
If we want to leave the record open for longer to allow more evidence to come in up front, because we're giving ourselves an extra 2 weeks, that's fine. So we could leave the record open for 2 weeks and then a week for written comments and then a week for a final rebuttal.
Okay.
And then you have 2 weeks at that point before the hearing, with holidays mixed in there too. But
I think Commissioner Edge's idea there, might make sense, especially in given kind of the legal review and potentially the applicant needing to submit new information to make sure everything aligns or doesn't, that 2 weeks. But I did see Justin's box highlight, so I'll let him speak.
Yeah, I mean, this is typically the time at the meeting where the limitations of the Zoom platform are reaching out. What we would typically do is take a pause, get off the record for 5 minutes, and everybody involved, the applicant and staff would bang out a calendar on a piece of paper, and we would then implement that. So I think it's probably advisable to go ahead and continue it to a date with to a date for a hearing, with the idea that if if everybody's agreeable to this, Vera bangs out kind of a calendar with some thoughts behind it to the applicant, and potentially we revise based on anything, or we stick with what we bang out tonight.
Do we need to spell out the schedule in our motion? Other than a date certain?
I think at this point you need to establish a date certain for the next hearing, which would be, as the statute says, I've got the language of the statute right here. Continued to a date, time, and place certain at least 7 days from the date of the initial evidentiary hearing, and an opportunity shall be provided at that continued hearing for persons to present and rebut new evidence.
Or?
Arguments or testimony.
No, or C though, right? There's an additional.
If the record is left open, but right now we're continuing the hearing.
Without closing the record. I mean, I guess that's what I thought we were doing, is leaving the record open.
Yes, we are leaving the record open, and new written evidence. If new written evidence is submitted to the continued hearing, any person can request another continuance to respond to that written evidence.
It just really starts putting us really tight when we don't.
That was my first note to Vera when we started going down this path, is it puts us in a really tight time constraint, given the mechanics of how this decision works.
So it would be ideal to leave the record open, but not have another evidentiary hearing. Am I correct?
No. We have to have another evidentiary hearing. That's what we're continuing into.
Okay.
Maybe real quickly, recognizing we're coming up on 10 o'clock, and I make a motion that we continue to 10:10.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
I guess we're going to continue it to a date certain of 12/8, and then we'll just work out the details as we go, I guess.
Well, 12/8 would then be the date for people to submit written testimony or to present new evidence, arguments, or testimony in person. That would be our new evidentiary hearing.
And you want to go that far out for that evidentiary hearing?
If that's the case, then it can be November 24th.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a better move with the 120-day clock.
Yeah. I think the December 8th made more sense if it was, everybody doing things by a week and then a week and then a week. But if
we need another evidentiary hearing, then we should.
But if we're just doing a straight continuation.
And if there is written evidence submitted at that continued hearing, then a person can request that they leave the record open for 7 days to submit additional evidence to respond to that written evidence.
Yep.
To that point, is there?
Then at that point, the record would close. There would be deliberations, but the local government has to allow the applicant at least 7 days after the record is closed to all other parties to submit their final written argument in support of the application. Does that make sense?
Why don't you, Justin, rephase what you think our proposal is right now?
Well, what I believe has been proposed is that the new evidence, this hearing be continued until November 24th. On November 24th, there will be an additional evidentiary hearing. People can submit written testimony. People can testify in person. There can be new evidence and arguments submitted. If there is written testimony submitted, a party can ask for an additional 7 days, at least 7 days, to respond to that new written testimony. when the record is closed to all other parties at that point, the applicant, unless they waive it, has an additional 7 days to submit a final written argument in support of the application.
See, I feel like this statute lets us make the choice to not have another evidentiary hearing, but instead to allow written testimony for 7 days and then comments on that testimony and then rebuttal at the end. I thought that's what we were allowed to do, so that we didn't have to have another full evidentiary hearing. But if your interpretation is that we should just do this until the 24th, and if we need to continue again, then we'll just have to continue again, then we should just get the ball rolling. So if the advice is the 24th, then I'll make a motion.
Okay, we'll entertain the motion, Commissioner Edge.
Okay, I make a motion to continue the hearing to a date certain of November 24th.
I second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 So we're obviously going to have to roll the work session items to the next future meeting. Do the commissioner staff any other business or updates? Any other items of discussion from the commissioners? Do we have a quick forecast for the future meetings, Laura?
Well, that might change based on tonight, so we're going to have to go in and clean that up, I think. So I apologize.
Okay, all right.
I apologize for that, but we'll get you a new schedule out.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we would have done this any better tonight. We just had some late submissions and quite a few public testimony, but we want the public to be heard, and so that's well worth the time. Okay.
If I could, Commissioner Edge, I'm not sure I understood your question 100%. Could you restate your question about the continuance? I didn't understand the distinction you were trying to make.
Yeah, mute.
Thanks for the reminder. I thought the statute allowed us to leave the record open for written testimony. We continue the hearing, but leave the record open for written testimony only.
I think that's correct. I think if we limit it to written testimony, then the calendar kicks to where people have an opportunity to request time to respond to the new written testimony. But I think you can extend it to continue it to the next hearing for written testimony under the statute.
Can I ask for?
Is that what you suggested that we do?
Yes. And then I thought that what we ended up doing, the motion was just to continue the hearing. But what I was suggesting is that we leave the record open for written testimony only, and then prescribe the response period so that we can head into that December 8th meeting or hearing prepared for deliberation.
Okay.
Vera.
Through the chair, Mike Robinson has raised his hand and has requested to speak.
No, not at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted you to know.
Okay. So do we need to modify, withdraw and modify the current proposal?
Chairman, ask you if I may, I would be interested in hearing from Mr. Robinson. I think.
Yeah, I would too, and I think we'll have an opportunity to do that, but we don't have enough time to do that at this point.
I'd be happy to revise my motion and restate the motion if that's something that we can do, because okay. I think that's the right way to go.
No, I think Justin supports it. So go ahead. We'll entertain another motion.
So I move that for application PD-2020-001 that we continue the hearing, leaving the record open 1 week for written testimony. 2 weeks for written testimony, sorry. 1 week for comments in response to that testimony or evidence. And then 1 final week for applicant rebuttal. And then our hearing will continue on December 8th, the date certain of December 8th.
Do I have a second?
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so this application remains open. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Adam, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Adam, can you hear me?